And good evening. I'm happy to welcome all my fellow board members and call the May 8th, 2018 school board meeting to order. Whether you are in attendance here tonight or watching from another location, my colleagues and I are pleased you took the time to join us. We certainly do appreciate and applaud your commitment to partnering with us in support of our schools, our students, our staff, and most importantly, our community. While the board and Brevard Public Schools staff members are fully committed to doing our very best to ensure excellence in Brevard Public Schools, we know that our success depends heavily on an engaged and committed community to work alongside us, partner with us, and help us to continually improve. Thank you for being active participants in this process. Pam, roll call, please.
Mrs. Belford? Present.
Mr. Craig?
Present.
Mrs. Deskovich?
Present.
Mr. Susan?
Here.
And Mr. Ziegler?
Here. This evening, Matt Reed, Assistant Superintendent of Government and Community Relations, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time, I'd like to offer my fellow board members and Dr. Blackburn the opportunity to recognize staff, students, or community members. I think we started that way, so Mr. Susan, would you like to start tonight?
Sure, I'd like to take an opportunity. There's a agenda item tonight dealing with AVID in the elementary school. For many of you that don't know what AVID is, it's one of the most phenomenal programs for schools, not only for students to learn how to take notes and how to do their studies and everything else, but it's also the best program I've ever had as a teacher for instructional staff and policies. So there is a lot of good things going on when we're pushing AVID for the first time down into our elementary schools. It's at Gulfview, and now we're moving to Palm Bay, and I couldn't say enough about AVID in our district and the scores that it's going to help us out with. I would also like to say thank you to NASA for having me for the NASA Hunch program this past weekend. We had Palm Bay, Bayside, and Space Coast were in attendance. That's absolutely amazing up at Kennedy Space Center. We dominated the entire Hunch program, and for those of you that don't know what that is, that's high schoolers who are coming up with projects that are then used inside of the space station for applications in space. 3 of our programs that we had here are actually going to be in use up in the space station, and on top of that, we had 3 out of the 4 top teams in the entire state of Florida that were at Kennedy Space Center. So it's an amazing opportunity. I also wanted to say thank you to Viera Pizza. They raised $22,500 in one 5K to go towards what will be a Viera track like satellite. So now that piece began. Thanks a lot for your I see you in the crowd, the principal who created the satellite track. So that now is at Viera, and we're trying to do that here. And then also wanted to say I sat at one of the best baseball games that I've seen in a while. Viera versus Melbourne went back and forth for the District 7A championship, and the Viera pulled it off in the end, 6-5 in the last inning, and now is moving on to the regionals. And I wanted to also give a shout out to my Viera High School softball team, who is undefeated and may make a run at the state championship. And a lot of other things, but that's just what I have for now.
Thank you, Mr. Susan. Ms. Deskovich?
Yes, I would like to thank Running Zone and the Running Zone Foundation. This past Saturday, they put on the final mile of the Space Coast Countdown to Fitness. This is put on by the foundation, so it's free to all students in Brevard County. It's the 3rd year they've been doing it. This year it grows every year, and this year they had 2,491 students register, and they run and log their miles over 10 weeks, and the goal is to run a full marathon, 26.2 miles. And then on Saturday, they all met up and they run the last mile together. And they have teams from all different schools, public schools, charter schools, private schools. They're all there, all in matching shirts for each team. And they run that last mile together. And some of them are like tiny, 4 or 5 years old, running that last mile. And it was very inspiring to see. And I'm very grateful for Running Zone for putting health in the forefront of our students' minds. So I want to say thank you to them. And then also, as Matt said, there's another agenda item that I'd like to speak to now, and that is Satellite Edgewood and Roosevelt Elementary School. We'll be recognizing them tonight in just a few minutes as The official recognition will be Suicide Prevention Certified Schools. And they had to work hard to get that status, and it's important to our students. And I just want to give them a huge shout out for that. And I hope that all of our schools through the next year will work to gain that status also. And then last but not least, I want to give a huge thank you to Dr. Mullins there in the back. We've been working him like a dog through all of these security issues. He's the one that's been negotiating with all the municipalities, the chiefs, the sheriff's office, dealing with 5 school board members, a superintendent. He's been working really hard. And so thank you, Dr. Mullins, for all you do for our district. Thanks, John.
Ms. Belford?
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Just a few quick thank yous. All of us, I think, all 5 board members had the opportunity to attend senior boards recently. Mr. Craig and Mr. Susan and myself were at Edgewood, and I believe Ms. Deskovich and Mr. Ziegler at West Shore. My mind is always blown when we attend those events because we have some phenomenally intelligent students in this district, and they just do an amazing job. So many thanks to Edgewood for inviting us to join you, and I look forward to coming back next year. And please congratulate your kiddos and let them know that they did a phenomenal job, and we were very impressed. Also, just wanted to say a quick thank you. I have been on a determination tour to meet with all of my schools over the past month or so, to meet with administrators, faculty and staff, and parents and students, to have conversations around what we can do to improve as a whole. But that required the administrators at all of my schools to do some hustling to find times for those meetings to occur and fit it into the schedule. So I just want to say a quick shout out to them. Thank you all for accommodating that and giving me the opportunity to have that dialogue. It has helped significantly in this process, and I appreciate it. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Ziegler.
Thank you. First, I would like to recognize West Melbourne's newest council member, John Ditmore, who's with us today. Congratulations on that. Ditto on West Shore. Those students always leave me also wondering what I missed in school. But I'll tell you what, there was one presentation that hit home with me in the classroom that we were observing in. My father has Parkinson's, and there was a West Shore student had a very ingenious idea that seemed to have merit on how to help Parkinson's patients. And I want to keep an eye on that guy because I think he's going to cure that disease by the time he gets out of college. Very, very impressive. And as this is that time of year for graduations, for promotions, and for student awards. And while we all attend the graduations in force, and it's always a thrill to shake the hands of all those students as they come across the stage and see the different levels of excitement on their face, I'll tell you what, when you do awards for the elementary school kids and those kindergartners and first graders getting those awards, that is definitely a precious sight to see. And I enjoyed doing that at West Melbourne School for Science last week. 3 hours of awards. It was more challenging than graduation, but it was definitely rewarding to see all of them. And last of least is Teacher Appreciation Week, and congratulations to all our teachers for what you do. We definitely appreciate you, and we're going to make every effort to show you that we do. Thank you.
Dr. Blackburn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I, too, want to echo a couple of pieces that board members have already stated. First of all, happy Teacher Appreciation Week to all of our phenomenal teachers in this district. We just could not do it. Thank you, thank you, thank you to infinity. Also, Brevard Public Schools recently commenced a 4-week parenting series on autism spectrum disorder back in April. The sessions were well attended and received very positive feedback. We appreciate the parents who were able to join the district team in this training. Janine Knight, one of our resource teachers, she was nominated and has been awarded the Florida College Access Network's Community Resilience Unsung Heroes Award. This recognition is bestowed upon Florida community members who answer the call to support students impacted by some of the extraordinary events that challenged our state this past year. Ms. Knight will be recognized at a special awards ceremony on May 11th, congratulations on this very, very well-deserved recognition. I want to congratulate Mr. Jeff Arnott, who's sitting in the back there. He, in addition to all of his leadership skills here in adult ed, career technical, he's recently been admitted to the University of Pennsylvania PhD program. So congratulations, soon to be Dr. Arnott, who's not going anywhere, just going there for school, but he'll be here, right? Definitely want to echo Mrs. Deskovich, the work effort by Dr. Mullins and his team working with our sheriff's office, all of our municipalities, to get us in very, very short order to a place where we can vote on viable options to provide security to our schools. Just a yeoman's effort, to say the least. Thank you, Dr. Mullins and your staff. We would not have the ability to solicit so many opinions and comments and concerns from the community if not for the effort of Mr. Matt Reed and his entire department in setting up all those community and staff events around town, and we really appreciate the support and the assistance from that department as well. I think that's it, Mr. Craig.
Thank you, Dr. Blackburn. The only thing I'll add is, with obviously the Edgewood Senior Boards, Jackie, your team did an amazing job, and obviously your staff in helping to prepare those kids. The one young man that I was just blown away with was he was a saxophone player, and he had taken a string quartet movement. I believe it was one of Beethoven's kind of obscure string quartet movements, but he had translated it note for note into a quartet for the 4 types of saxophone. And the hours that he had spent to meticulously move it and be able to translate it into the different scales that it needed to be, it was just amazing. I mean, it's just phenomenal, and the passion that he showed when explaining it, and then the video of the quartet playing was just amazing. So thank you very much to all you're doing with the students there at Edgewood. One thing I think nobody mentioned, but I do want to give a shout out to all of our art teachers. The whole board had the opportunity to attend the school board art show, at least the award ceremony. I think it was on the 25th here, and we got to see some just phenomenal art. The stuff that comes out of our kids anywhere from first grade all the way through seniors in high school is just amazing. The concepts, what they can do with their minds and their hands is just amazing. So congratulations to all of them and to all of our art teachers and principals that support that art show and the arts. Thank you. And we also, Mr. Ziegler and I got to attend retiree Day dinner this Saturday, where we honored, I think, about 350 retirees for this year. Always a great event. Community Credit Union, once again, an awesome partner sponsoring that event and just giving a really elegant evening. The Bayshore Band was here, led by our Teacher of the Year, Brandon Jenkins, and just an awesome way to close out some just phenomenal careers. So thank you very much for all those that put that together. And that brings us to the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Blackburn.
Mr. Craig and members of the board, on this evening's agenda, we have 1 recognition, 35 consent items, 4 action items, and 5 information items. You also have the yellow supplemental agenda, which are changes made to the agenda since being released to the public. Administrative staff recommendations was deleted. Consent items F8 on reappointment nominations of continuing professional service contract teachers for the 2018-2019 school year, F19 on reappointment nominations of support personnel for the 2018-2019 school year, and item F28 on the 2018-2019 MOU, district security and SROs with Brevard County Sheriff's Office have been revised. Item F11 on 2018-2019 MOU with Brevard County Sheriff's Office for the Brevard Public Schools Specialist, School Safety and Security was added to consent. Item G44 on BCSO STOMP MOU was moved from consent to action and has since been revised. Information item H52 on job description, specialist, school safety and security is an addition.
Thank you. And before I ask for the wishes of the board, utilizing board policy and chair just cause, I have one extra item to add, which would go under G48. I believe you've all received an email from Ms. Archer regarding it. I'll ask Ms. Enval to read it. It's regarding Legacy Academy Charter Incorporated.
Thank you. On April 17th, you recall in a public meeting, the school board voted to authorize the superintendent to send a letter notifying Legacy of the proposed 90-day termination of the charter contract under Section 1002.338B. On April 18th, the superintendent issued that notice, which stated the grounds for the proposed action and stipulated that under Section 1002.338B, the Charter Schools Governing Board was permitted to, within 14 calendar days after its receipt of the notice, request a hearing on the proposed termination. On April 27th, 2018, the superintendent received a letter from the board chair of Legacy Academy Charter advising that the governing board had voted unanimously to request a hearing challenging the 90-day termination notice. And on May 1st, Council for Legacy Academy Charter submitted an additional request for hearing. So both requests for hearing were timely. Under Section 1002.338B, the hearing shall be conducted at sponsor's election in accordance with one of the following procedures. One is a direct hearing conducted by the sponsor within 60 days after receipt of the request for a hearing. And two is a hearing conducted by an administrative law judge assigned by the Division of Administrative Hearings. So the recommended, what the board now needs to decide is which one of those two options you choose, the board as the sponsor, to elect.
Thank you. And so based on the requirement in Section 1002.338B, Florida statutes, that the hearing shall be conducted at the sponsor's election, I find that this item, based on its timely nature, needs to be added to tonight's agenda, and that a vote be taken under the action agenda item G48 as the sponsor of the charter school. Do I hear a motion for the adoption of the agenda as read?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Deskovich, seconded by Mr. Susan. Is there any discussion?
No, sir.
Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 5-0. We'll move on to the recognition portion of the meeting. Dr. Blackburn.
There is one recognition this evening. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Beth Theddy, our Assistant Superintendent for Student Support Services, who will facilitate the recognition of 3 schools as suicide prevention certified schools. Dr. Theddy.
Good evening, Mr. Craig, board members, Dr. Blackburn. As you already know, youth suicide awareness and prevention training is critical for our students. Florida statute provides for schools that incorporate 2 hours of training with 100% participation from instructional staff, along with completion of a follow-up activity and staff development training to be considered suicide prevention certified schools. Brevard has chosen the online program for the 2-hour training, Act on Facts, and it provides awareness and addresses the critical but limited role of educators in the process of identification and referral of potentially suicidal youth. It focuses on the realities and challenges inherent in the school setting through a variety of training formats. In addition to its other content, the program highlights 4 categories of youth who may be at elevated risk for suicide: those involved in bullying, LGBTQ youth, gifted youth, and students being reintegrated back into school after a suicide attempt. As you will recall, in February, we honored 3 schools who have achieved this milestone. Tonight, it's my pleasure to recognize 3 additional schools in Brevard that have completed the requirements to be considered suicide prevention certified schools: Satellite High School, Edgewood Junior Senior High School, and Roosevelt Elementary School. This is no small endeavor for these schools. It took an amazing commitment on the part of not only the teachers, but the administration and the staff as well to make this happen. As a token of our appreciation and in thanks for the tremendous professionalism and effort of their staff, I'd like to present each of these schools with a certificate of appreciation. Mr. Craig and Mr. Blackburn, if you'd like to come down and join our schools, and I will call our schools up in just a second. And then once all the schools have been recognized, if you'll stay standing and we'll do a picture. Thank you. From Satellite High School, we have the principal, Mr. Mark Elliott. From Edgewood Junior Senior High School, we have Principal Jackie Ingrata. Assistant Principal Dr. Julia Diakakis, and Certified School Counselors Christy Cooper-Denton, Cheryl Creston, and Danielle Taylor. And from Roosevelt Elementary School, we have Principal Kimberly Humphrey, Assistant Principal Doreen Carlo Cornell, and Certified School Counselor Dr. Stephanie Anderson. Thank you and congratulations to these 3 schools. Thank you.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
if I could, Dr. Theddy and those 3 schools, we're learning more and more that the social emotional well-being of our children, our babies, just our number 1 concern, and everything else in life is a distant second at best. And I just want to, again, thank those 3 schools, those staffs, for going the extra mile in certifying and qualifying yourself for this effort. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we are now at public comments. Though School Board Policy 0169.1 limits to 30 minutes the portion of the meeting during which the public is invited to participate and provide public comment, the policy further provides that this time limit may be extended by a vote of the board. In this case, as it pertains to legislation which permits a school board to consider arming staff to serve as guardians, this board is heard from the public at the regularly scheduled board meetings on February 27th, March 13th, March 27th, and April 17th, has had town hall style meetings on April 24th, May 1st, May 7th, and has had employee meetings on April 23rd, April 24th, April 30th, May 1st, and May 7th. In addition, the board has received emails and has had individual conversations with multiple constituents. At this time, it would be my recommendation that the board vote to permit an extended period of time for tonight's public comment, increasing the time from the regular 30 minutes. Prior to moving forward with the remainder of the agenda, tonight we have 28 speakers signed up. And so my original recommendation would have been 20, and for 1 hour, my recommendation or my question to the board is, would anyone like to make a motion either to extend to 1 hour or to extend for all 28?
Move to extend all 28.
We have a motion to extend to all 28, seconded by Ms. Deskovich. Is there any discussion? Please vote. Voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Nothing heard. Motion passes. We'll hear all 28. As always, and many of you have been here before, keep in mind that reasonable decorum is expected at all times, and your statements shall be directed to the board chair. The chair may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement when time is up, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. Should an individual not observe proper etiquette, the chair may request the individual leave the meeting. Let's all encourage an environment appropriate for our children who may be present, who may be watching from home. To remind everybody, we do have a high-speed new 3-minute countdown clock. We'll be using that as appropriate. You'll hear a little ding in the background, and I will be asking you at that time to move on and finish up. I will call you in groups of 3, so please be ready so we can get through everybody. And as always, I'd ask that you keep the side comments down so that the board can hear the comments from the individual speakers and also their names and the positions that they're taking. First 3 are Marie Rogerson, Carly Hudson, Daniel Batchelder.
As stated, my name is Marie Rogerson, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you tonight. I have 2 children at Quest Elementary, a second and a 4th grader. Found in the Declaration of Independence are these inspired words by Thomas Jefferson. We hold these truths self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then this key phrase, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. The decision before you tonight about school safety goes back to that basic purpose of government, namely the right to protect life. As a government entity, it is your duty to protect my children while they are in your care. Governments have throughout history used armed personnel to protect the right to life. We are blessed to live in a country that generally enjoys peace. We live in peace because of the military and police forces that we maintain. When we face a threat, we don't rationalize it away with statistics, we prepare for it. The presence of the Air Force Base or police officers don't make me feel scared or unsafe, they make me feel secure. That's the viewpoint I take when I examined the Guardian program. When implemented properly, these things should make students feel safe and protected, just like our military and police officers do. I have heard the argument made by some that knowing there's guns on campus scares students. But I ask, what of the fear of those students who wonder how they'll protect themselves should a shooter attack? Whose fear is more valid? One fears a person put in place to protect them. The other fears someone hell-bent on murder. It is your job to protect both these types of students and to help them overcome their fears with whatever programs you put into place. I trust that in the implementing of the exact details of the SRO, Guardian, whatever security program you enact, you will do everything in your power to minimize the risk to students and staff. The school board bylaws state the following. While the board has an obligation to determine and assess citizens' needs, it is understood that when citizens elect delegates to represent them, they at the same time endow their representatives with the authority to exercise their best judgment in determining policies, making decisions, and approving procedures. I would simply ask that the board remember that. Remember that the vast majority of the parents you've heard from are not experts. It is your job to have listened to experts. We elected you to be our experts. Use your best judgment and fulfill your duty to protect our children's right to life. If you do that with the purest of motives, then come what may. At least you will have done what you felt was in the best interest of our children, and we can't ask any more of you than that. Thanks.
Carly Hudson, Daniel Batchelder, Marty Ward.
Hi, my name's Carly Hudson. I'm from Melbourne High School. I'm just going to make this really short and sweet. I want to thank you guys first for having all the town halls. I feel like that was very beneficial to us and to you guys. It felt great to actually have you guys listen to us and take all of our opinions into consideration as much as you guys could. Hats off to the BPS teachers. Thank you for all you're doing, especially for Teacher Appreciation Week. And then just to add that, our hats today, our faculty already wear too many hats, so please, with the STOMP program, don't give them another. Thank you.
Daniel Batchelder, Marty Ward, Hunter Law.
Hello, my name's Daniel Batchelder. I'm here as a parent. Those for and against STOMP, which I believe actually included F11 on the consent agenda, just modified. Those for and against STOMP, Guardians, or any other amateur security are both scared children will die. Those for are scared because of anecdotes and dogma and alternative facts. Those against are scared because of facts and evidence. Those against are frustrated by logical arguments made to those that may be illogical. Logic dictates hardened schools with 2-minute response times need SROs less than yet-to-be hardened schools with 30-minute response times. Those for Stomp seem to ignore facts and listen to the opinions of claimed experts. Experts once thought the earth was flat. Experts executed innocent women for witchcraft, and some so-called experts think the solution to guns is more guns. These experts are wrong. The arguments that anyone can make are independent of their expertise. A child can be a genius, a sheriff can be the opposite. The side for Stomp is ignorant of their own hypocrisy and blinded by a bloody bias. The hypocrisy is knowing sensitivity training is needed, but not knowing the very need for sensitivity training makes Stomp racially poisonous. The bloody bias is from the dogmatic belief that more guns will prevent more death, but good guys with guns kill innocent children too. Firearm negligence is rampant. This is not semantics. The board may have fallen into a false dichotomy of choice. A mass shooting will not happen as a result of voting no on Stomp. Fear leads to the Stomp temptation, but if a horrific mass shooting occurs in a 3-layered school, the school board won't be at fault. Your primary responsibility is towards education, not school security. Security is not in the BPS vision, mission statement, or operational beliefs. Mass shootings are the fault of the NRA, Congress, and the state, and we all recognize that. Do not sacrifice education for accidental executions. Stomp is Russian roulette with our children. There has been no real public debate on Stomp over only a series of town halls, flawed surveys, unbalanced reporting, and a desperate stream of public comments in this room. Therefore, either vote no or table the vote until a proper debate can be had, a debate in which we hope the sheriff will participate, a debate at which we will likely see cognitive dissonance, the Dunning-Kruger effect, and unconscious incompetence. Mr. Craig, it is my understanding of the board rules that those for public comments that I can ask something for which I require immediate clarification. And so I have this question. Should Stomp, a modified Stomp, Guardians, or any other amateur security be enacted, how many negligent deaths as a result of those programs in this county or others will need to occur before you would vote to stop them? This is not semantics or a personal attack, so I'll say it again. How many negligent Stomp deaths will need to occur before you'd vote to stop Stomp? Thank you.
Marty Ward, Hunter Law, Mark Hutchins.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Marty Ward, founder of Confidence Eliminates Bullying. And whatever decision you make tonight, I am support of what Dr. Blackburn talks about, which is emotional intelligence. I've come before you before, and I will continue to come, because what I believe is that no matter what happens to our exterior of our buildings and of our fences and of our glass and our doors and whatever, is that we really need to have kids to believe in themselves, to know who they are. And when kids believe in themselves, then they won't believe the mean words of the bully. Because having known for decades as a teacher, as a school-based social worker, and as someone who's been bullied much of her life, that if you don't believe the bully, you're not hurt. And when you know how talented, able, and gifted you are, when you have the emotional intelligence to be able to discern that anger at its base is sadness, and that depression is only pushing down your power to express all of who you are, that we will have children who will be able to feel safe in our schools because they will have the safety within themselves to believe in themselves, to trust themselves. And we will have teachers who are going to have kids who cooperate more easily, so teachers will have more time to teach. Administrators will have more time to lead. And we can have a school in which confidence boosters rather than fault finders walk our walls, because we are going to be focusing on what we want, confident kids, not on trying to eliminate bullying. I mean, you can't stop the rain. Can anybody here stop the rain? And you can't stop the rain of the words of the bully either. And when kids know who they are, and they know that they matter, that they're a gift to our world, well, then they're going to be so less likely to want to hurt themselves or others. And we at Confidence Eliminates Bullying would be willing to provide a program for one of your schools for free to show you how this would work, to be there to support your teachers with in-depth training, and to provide a Being Me Matters ceremony. I just returned from Uganda, where I spoke to over 10,000 children and 1,000 adults. And our program in Uganda has grown so large that in 6 weeks, my 7-person team in Uganda has touched 20,000 more lives who know that the children know that being me matters. And when you know you matter, you're not going to hurt yourself or anyone else, and you can feel safe within the walls of our school, no matter who is there to protect you. You'll have yourself. And I have some paperwork, if I'd be willing to come forward and just share it with the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you can hand that to the deputy, thank you. Hunter Law, Mark Hutchins, Elaine Kirk.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Hunter Law, and I'm a junior from Satellite High School and treasurer of the Teenage Republicans there. I'm here today to offer my opinion on the issue of allowing a school staff to carry guns. Since I've previously focused on why it is necessary for more guns to be on campus, I would like to argue first and foremost that staff not only should be allowed to carry guns, but they have the right to. The Second Amendment protects the people from their right to keep and bear arms being infringed upon by the federal government, and the 14th Amendment incorporates that right to self-preservation to lower governments. The question then becomes, should we consider public schools as part of the government or business? According to several Supreme Court decisions, including Tinker v. Des Moines and Engel v. Vital, which state that the First Amendment exists in school environments, public schools are regarded as part of the government. This logically would conclude that staff, including teachers, have a right to carry weapons on them, something that currently refused to teachers by the contract agreed to by this school board in the Brevard Federation of Teachers in Article 6, Section N, Clause 12. Therefore, I also call for allowing teachers to opt out of that part of the contract if they would qualify and volunteer for the Marshall Program. Now, some people have been threatening to vote you out or recall you if the apparent majority doesn't get its way. Now is as good a time as any to remind you that neither America nor Brevard is a democracy, but a republic. The founders feared democracy as it wouldn't protect the rights and interests of a minority. And I say that the general welfare must be spoken of now, despite the special appeals to special welfare. This is the time to attend to the liberties of all, not just to the demands of a few. The people do not elect representatives to do every single thing the majority asks. They elect their representatives based on the promises and positions of said representatives. According to Frederick Douglass, the man who is right is a majority. He who has God and conscience on his side has a majority against the universe. If you believe your conscience to be right, do not betray your conscience and your position purely because you are afraid to lose your job. Winston Churchill once said, "The best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. You best know this issue, and you best know if you are right or the people are wrong. Vote what you believe, vote your conscience, never surrender. Thank you."
Mark Hutchins, Elaine Kirk, and Karen Clark.
Good evening. My name is Mark Hutchins. To the members of the board and fellow citizens, I stand up here tonight as a father, a veteran, and a proud American. I'm here to speak up for our children. It is our responsibility to protect them, plain and simple. Since the preventable tragedy that took place at Marjory Stoneman High, many have sought to use for destructive political ends the blood of innocents to attack the very foundations of our country. Their agenda is clear: to use as pawns the victims in the advancement of stripping us all of the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This agenda must be seen for what it is: mercenary and anti-American. On this, there is no doubt. We must have certified adults to protect our schools, be they staff, SROs at every school. We must establish unshakable protocols that truly harden the school grounds. I have spoken to one of the board members during a public forum in regards to the ease with which access to Bear Island High was accomplished. Even today, as I drove past Rockledge High, the grounds were shockingly not secure. Our young people and staff were vulnerable to anyone who intended to do them harm today. The schools must be secured, period. Do not tell me this cannot be accomplished. We have the ability to do anything if we have the will. I advocate for implementation immediately of the STOMP program, along with adding SROs to every high school. In the meantime, school guardians, as has been done in Polk County, would provide coverage for the elementary and middle school levels, coordinated training among the staff with a means of communication in the event of an emergency. Let me make it clear to this board, to this community, weakness is not the answer. It is courage that will protect our children and staff from danger. Coddling criminality and refusing to take action is what will lead to the most recent tragedy and all that have come before. Excuse me. The question is tonight, will this board, this community demonstrate cowardice in the face of reality of our times, or will it demonstrate courage to take action? I encourage you to take action. Show our children that we have the courage and the will to protect them. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Elaine Kirk, Karen Clark, Lara Torrijos.
So I'm not speaking on the agenda item. I just want to make sure I'm in the right time. Is that
Good.
Okay. All right, my name is Elaine Kirk. I've lived in Palm Bay for most of my life. I attended Lockmar Elementary 30 years ago when Mrs. Hostetler was first instated as the principal. I am now a mother of 3 children. For the 2018-19 school year, I will have a 4th grader, a 2nd grader, and a kindergartner. I currently serve on the PTA board, the school advisory council, and I volunteer at least on a weekly basis. And this has been the case for the last 4 years. So far, my oldest 2 daughters have truly been blessed with excellent teachers. These teachers have gone above and beyond in every aspect. They have kept primary school engaging while still emphasizing academics. My oldest daughter has always been challenged while still loving school. My middle daughter has come to love and excel in school as well. They have had the same teachers. I bring up these points not to praise Lockmar and how great it is, but because it has been brought to my attention that their kindergarten teacher, Amber Blankenship, has been let go for the next school year. I cannot possibly express to you the level of anger and disappointment I have felt when I heard. I am as angry today as I stand before you as when I got the news. We are talking about a teacher who is so hands-on, loving, dedicated, and non-conventional in the best sense. She is an excellent communicator. She keeps kindergarten fun. She does sensory activities, even though it means leaving a big mess for her to clean up at the end of a long day. She does these things because she knows how important these activities are for developing minds. You may now be thinking that there are other teachers who will fit the same mold for my son when he starts kindergarten in the fall. Unfortunately, Mrs. Hostetler has also let go the other awesome teacher who taught kindergarten, Mrs. Waterbury. I could sing her praises in the same way that I sing Ms. Blankenship's. I understand that enrollment projections are lower for the next school year. I understand there is a business side to running schools, but if you look at these 2 teachers and their track records of having fewer behavioral issues, better test scores, few, if any, parent complaints, and pretty much anything else you could be comparing to other teachers, there is no possible way that these 2 teachers should be on the chopping block. If you, as a school board, are truly looking out for the best interests of our babies, as you, Dr. Blackburn, say, you would not allow these fantastic teachers to be let go or quit. If you come to Lockmar and observe for any period of time, you would see that teacher morale is not what it should be, volunteer participation is not what it should be, and there is a reason for these things, and I will leave it to you to figure it out. But I can tell you one thing. In the 4 years that I have been volunteering, I have been acknowledged 1 time by the principal. So I have a folder of letters from parents and former students of these teachers, some are anonymous because parents are fearful of backlash on their children. I have also included some comments people have shared with me about how they felt. I sincerely hope you will take my comments into consideration as well as take time to read these letters. Thank you.
Karen Clark, Lara Torrijos, and Richard Charbonneau.
Hello, Board. My name is Karen Clark. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I wanted to start off with the Second Amendment has been the Heller case that went to the Second Amendment, went all the way up to Supreme Court, and Justice Scalia said that you are able, governments, cities, counties, states are able to regulate firearms. So when I understand shall not be infringed, but Supreme Court said, sure, we can infringe. We don't want those felons having firearms. Okay, to start off, most parents are not against guns. They want SROs, not rent-a-cops or armed school staff. To have 3 town hall listening sessions and then change the proposal at the school board meeting does not serve your students, parents, and community. At the town hall meetings, you stress that you want to make decisions on facts. With that in mind, I am confused as why you spoke at length about Sheriff Ivey's STOMP program, but that you failed to mention that Sheriff Ivey has recommended that you table the controversial Marshall program. This was reported in an article in the Florida Today on April 11, 2018. The 3 town hall meetings were after that date, but this important fact was never mentioned in the first 2 town halls. I didn't get to Titusville, sorry. You act as though there is an even split between those for and against this controversial program, although if the facts were known, it is probably 80% against arming staff and 20% for arming staff. I would like you to honestly share the communication you have received on this issue. This is a huge decision. Andy Ziegler mentioned the liability costs are astronomical. Matt Susan said that if an armed guardian can't intervene in fights, when you arm the deans or administrators, the administration, who will break up the fights? This is not a decision to rush into and make mistakes. We need to understand these plans and have more town halls before you make any decisions. We don't want poorly trained or volunteer school staff. We don't want rent-a-cops who have no connection to our schools. The students deserve fully trained SROs, the same SROs you have protecting you tonight. At the town hall on May 1st, Matt Susan floated the idea of security companies. The idea was not explained and just caused more confusion. He explained, we don't have the money, and even if we had the money, local police chiefs don't have the staff. He did try to offer some out-of-the-box solutions, such as providing a desk at the school where on-duty police officers could write reports and offering to have multiple police officers pick up extra shifts to help staff the schools. He mentioned that the hired security office could be temporary. I wonder if that's the same kind of temporary deal that they offered the teachers when they asked them to teach 6 of 7. In closing, you want solutions, not complaints. Here are my solutions. Ask Rick Scott to have the Budget Allocation Committee reallocate funds to fully fund the SRO program instead of just $37,000 they are currently offering. Stop pulling guidance counselors as proctors for the test. Low-tech solutions such as ways to secure the door. Stop telling us what you can't do. What every other school, large district has done. Do that. Opt out. Thank you.
Lara Torrijos, Richard Charbonneau, Megan Stolen.
Good evening. My name is Lara Torrillo. I'm an engineer, a mom of twin 16-year-old boys at Viera, and an avid STEAM volunteer in BPS schools. I'm here again tonight to talk with you about the latest incarnation of the STOMP Guardian program. To be honest, most of us have little understanding of your intentions with this new specialist position you are offering up, and this leaves many of us very uneasy. But I can tell you what I believe are critical items for you to consider as you decide the fate of my children's future in BPS schools. Number 1 on my list of concerns is that anyone who is not a trained uniform SRO increases the risk to our kids. The risk of injury in a school shooting is less than 1 in 600 million. I could win the lottery 40 times in a row and not approach those risks, and may I be so blessed. But the minute you introduce an underpaid, undertrained, armed civilian into the mix, that risk jumps to 1 in 8,000. It boggles my mind that you imagine that to be a fair trade for my kids' lives. Number 2 is that we as a county must opt out of the Guardian program. I want no chance of going back to the idea of armed staff with an administrative change slipped under the rug with nobody noticing. Lastly, there are a number of attributes of an SRO that makes this the only viable option for our schools. Like all law enforcement, SROs have extensive training and years of experience in how to maintain control of a situation, and especially their weapon, in a dynamic and volatile situation. Nothing about the Guardian program provides anywhere close to the requisite amount of training or experience. Like all law enforcement, SROs have training and experience in de-escalation. Use of a weapon is not their first tool of choice. For Guardians, this is the only tool they are provided with. SROs also have training specific to dealing with juveniles and children with special needs, both in general interactions as well as in a crisis. Anyone with a loaded weapon on school grounds must have this kind of training. Anything less puts our kids, and especially our kids with special needs, at great risk. The uniform is also critical. It marks an SRO as law enforcement and a professional and not a civilian. The uniform clearly identifies the SRO as someone who can help. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to decide good guy or bad guy. It makes the SRO identifiable to the students and faculty, other officers coming on the scene, and frankly, as a deterrent to an active shooter. These are the criteria we are considering when we decide whether or not we are willing to accept more guns in our schools. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The idea to add armed guards to our schools to protect against an active shooter is an emotional response, not based on reason or facts. As sad as those incidents are, they do not pose anywhere close to the same risk of accidents, mistaken identity, misreading the situation, bad judgment, or a bad guy taking the gun away from the guardian. Thank you.
Richard Charbonneau, Megan Stolen, Maria Dockery.
Good evening. Richard Charbonneau, Satellite Beach, parent of a 20-year-old Stetson student that's a senior. I have a unique qualification I don't think anybody else here has. On 9/11, I was a pilot in Boston the day of the mass murder of over 3,000 people. Subsequent to that, maybe one other person in the room, and I'm not going to ask him, I went to Marshall School. I carried a gun on the airplane. My primary duty on the plane was to fly the Boeing plane, and I did really good. I'm still here. And so was everybody else that flew with me. And the gun was to defend the cockpit. We didn't run out and shoot all the people that were on the plane. We did what we were supposed to do. We flew the plane. Now, Sheriff Ivey says when you call 911, it takes him 5 to 10 minutes to get there. I'm not saying another more word for 2 minutes. Okay, we're wrapping it up. Sheriff Ivey said 5 minutes to 10 minutes. In 2 minutes, 17 people just died.
Megan Stolen, Maria Dockery, Philip Stasek.
Hi, I'm nervous. My name is Megan Stolen, and I'm speaking as a parent of 2 teenage children at Edgewood Junior Senior High School. I want to thank the school board and staff who have been working to fulfill the unfunded mandate handed down by the folks in Tallahassee. We have come a long way. In a few short weeks, we've heard hundreds of people speak out against this proposal, and the board has demonstrated good faith in researching multiple options aimed at keeping our children safe. The most recent development is the consideration of a school safety specialist. I understand the reasoning behind this idea and believe that you believe this amounts to a good compromise. But I do think that more investigation on your part is needed. Armed security guards do not, in fact, result in greater safety. When I was 22 years old, 2 armed men in masks burst through a door at a bank where I worked. One held a gun to my head, while the other knocked our lone officer unconscious. My life changed that day, even though I eventually recovered from the worst parts of the trauma that I and my coworkers suffered that day. 2 weeks later, 2 men came through a door at another bank in the same city and immediately shot and critically injured the armed guard who stood at the entrance. I offer this personal story for 2 reasons. The first is that I can tell you that having a gun aimed at you is a life-changing event, especially when you are young. Sometimes it's a good guy holding it, and sometimes it isn't. But either way, your life is the one in jeopardy, and there are long-lasting effects. Guns do not signify security and safety for many. They represent a threat, sometimes one that is wielded at home. Sometimes it's the symbol of bias and extreme power. Please do not equate a gun with safety. Even a good guy with a gun showing a threat of deadly force against a student can change his or her life forever, even if a shot is never fired. The second is that there is a misconception that armed security make people feel safer. A report by the Center for Investigative Reporting in 2013 using FBI crime statistics showed that the presence of an armed security guard tripled the rate of violence during the execution of a crime. In fact, the mere presence of an armed security guard was the strongest factor in whether the situation became violent, even when controlling for all other factors. I recognize that you are between a rock and a hard place, and what we all want is more funding to equip schools. A proper risk assessment should be an immediate priority. This would involve outside law enforcement experts as well as mental health professionals. I also ask that you set up a parent stakeholder oversight committee so that an adaptive approach to school security can be achieved.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate your time. Maria Dockery, Philip Stasek, and Nicholas Tumbalidis.
Good evening, I'm Maria Dockery. I'm a resident of Brevard County, and I'm very concerned about the safety of our children because our children are all of our futures. Our society is changing, like it or not, and we have to accept these changes because that problem is not going to go away. We cannot control the changes. We cannot control these changes, but what we can control is how we react to the changes. It's natural to fear the unknown. We can't allow fear to stop or paralyze us. We are fortunate to have one of the most proactive sheriffs in the country. This man has a proven track record of developing and implementing programs in law enforcement that have been adopted nationwide. We need to adopt a program that protects our children from an armed gunman. I also represent women, the many women who quietly make the personal decision to arm themselves. Like it or not, your teachers are already arming themselves. They're taking classes for their own personal safety. Not all teachers are afraid of guns. We need to adopt programs that protect our children. Arming a guardian who is willing to and able to confront an armed intruder in our schools is necessary. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I strongly encourage you to pass some form of armed guardian program tonight because tomorrow may be too late.
Philip Stasek, Nicholas Tumbalidis, and Vanessa Skipper.
Good evening, Mr. Craig, Board, and Dr. Blackburn. It's great to speak with you again. Thank you for listening to us tonight. As you have heard from the Space Coast Progressive Alliance before, we strongly believe that guns are not the solution. In fact, guns are the problem. Trying to fight fire with fire will surely end in a firefight that our students, BPS employees, would lose. We ask you to vote no on any kind of a program that increases guns in our schools. We do support the SRO program. We do support having qualified deputies and law enforcement officers in schools. We really appreciate the efforts that you have made. We know that you go to bed at night concerned about the welfare of our students. We know that you get up in the morning working for their safety and for their well-being, and we certainly appreciate that. But again, if you want to escalate a conflict, add a gun. Again, guns really are not the solution. They are the problem. I also was an airline captain on September 11th, 2001, and my feeling is that eliminating guns from our society would certainly improve our lives. It certainly would work for our schools. My wife is a 24-year teacher in the BPS system, and I really do not like the idea of having more guns when she's at work. So I ask you, please, whatever decision you make tonight, I hope that it tends toward less guns rather than more guns in our schools. So please vote no. Support less guns in our schools. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? Thanks.
Nicholas Tombolitis, Vanessa Skipper, Trudy Onek.
Yes, good evening, school board members. Thank you for your public service. I think it's important to note that the question we're trying to answer tonight is not what will make our school personnel and students feel safer. It's what will actually make them safer. And I have a question for you all. I want to know why would a $3 million SRO program require a $37 million tax increase? Now, I don't have a PhD in mathematics, but the last time I checked, 3 million and 37 million were not the same number. And I also wanted to call attention to something that you said, Dr. Blackburn. You said one of the best things we can do to keep our schools safe is arm our employees with effective compensation. Now, what did the Parkland tragedy have to do with compensation? What did the Sandy Hook tragedy have to do with compensation? I thought that was frankly a baffling remark, and I think you do have an obligation to explain that. Because it certainly sounds like exploiting a tragedy, exploiting a serious discussion to fill up the coffers of the bureaucracy. So please, by all means, share with us the research that you have showing that teacher pay would reduce psychotic behavior in mass shootings. Oh, it doesn't exist? That's what I thought.
Sir, you can direct your comments to me as per the instructions at the beginning, please. Thank you.
Yes. So let's talk about STOMP. This is a carefully crafted plan, and no matter how you slice it, the public policy evidence supports the program. According to the data, the crime rate for the general public is about 37 times higher than the crime rate for police officers. But you know who has an even lower crime rate than police officers? Concealed permit holders. In Florida, the rate of misdemeanors and felonies for permit holders over the last 30 years was 1/8 the crime rate for officers. So the STOMP program actually places our trust in the most law-abiding people in our society. And as much as anti-gun activists would like for it to be true, there's simply no evidence that concealed permits increase crime. In fact, the opposite is true. According to the federal data, the number of concealed permits in our country has doubled over the last several years. And you would expect, whoa, double the guns. There must have been more violence, right? No, there hasn't been. The murder rate dropped to a 50-year low. So as leaders and elected officials, I know you're bombarded with the emotional case for why guns are scary, but please know the facts are on your side here. Law-abiding people disproportionately follow laws, and criminals do not. And I just want to make one final point. I think it's important for us to remember that at Parkland, it was not an SRO diving in front of students under the hail of gunfire to save lives. It was a coach and a mentor, Aaron Feiss, who did that. And it was a shame that he didn't have the tools he needed to save his own life and the lives of more students. Let's not make that mistake here.
Vanessa Skipper, Trudy Onik, Bob White.
Good evening, members of the board. Vanessa Skipper, English teacher at Cocoa High School and Vice President of the Brevard Federation of Teachers. As mentioned a couple, maybe a few times, today is recognized as the National Teacher Appreciation Day. I went back through the minutes and the agendas, and although I've been here for every meeting, sometimes they blend together, and I couldn't find where there was actually an official proclamation for today to be Teacher Appreciation Day in Brevard. So I'd like to see something like that actually come to fruition, because I think that that should warrant at least a proclamation on the agenda on Teacher Appreciation Day. It's also one thing to say that teachers are appreciated. It's another to show it. Here are some absolutes that you can do to appreciate teachers. 1, you can ensure adequate funding. Florida ranks 41st in the nation in pure pupil spending. You can't talk about attracting and retaining high-quality teachers and education staff professionals without talking about funding. If we're serious about every child's future, let's get serious about ensuring every child has a well-prepared teacher. So here's a proclamation. Whereas starting salaries and the instability of funding do not ensure that teachers can even pay off student loans, too many would-be educators decide to forego teaching for another career just to make a living wage. You can decide to provide competitive salaries. Whereas housing costs in many areas far outstrip the spending power of teacher salaries, we must bring our teacher salaries up to the national average. That brings the very difficult question as to how are we going to do this when Tallahassee can only increase base student funding by 47 cents? Number 1, we can stop congratulating the legislature for not doing their job. 2, and I'd like to thank the board members that have already come out in support of this, we can go ask the public for a mill this November. The first time we went out for the half penny, it failed. The second time we went out for the half penny, it passed. The success was because your teachers pounded the pavement to get the community's support. My own children and I spent weekends in a row, Fridays and Saturday nights, passing out candy and half-penny flyers at the zoo. Your teachers will help you go after a mill. We need you to vote to do so. You guys like to vote 5-0, and I'd like to see you vote 5-0 to go after a mill this November. Thank you.
Trudy Onik, Bob White, Vern Blanchette.
Hi, I'm Trudy Onik. I'm a Brevard Public Schools employee. I attended all 5 of your employee meetings and the 3 town halls, and at times I heard contradictory answers to the same questions from different board members. And then last night at the final town hall, we learned of the new plan. I have since watched your workshop on the BPS website and learned that it is really not a new plan. It's the same funding, the same training. It's just employing people off the street instead of employees. It's just bringing more guns, non-law enforcement guns, onto campus. Just another way of doing it. If you insist on voting on this tonight, I would hope that you would at least lay out all of your criteria for this so that we know you're all on the same page and you know what you're voting for. I'd like to see the qualifications for someone you would hire to do this. I'm glad you have decided and found the money to hire SROs, and we're just waiting on the manpower to do it. I would like for us to wait and just do SROs. Please vote against this.
Bob White, Vern Blanchette, and Sanford Olshansky.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Superintendent Blackburn, thank you very much for the opportunity this evening. I will be speaking to you in my capacity as the chairman of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Central East Florida, the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida, and also as the founder of the Liberty Catalyst Fund. This morning, I sent to each of you an email with a resolution attached. I believe you should have received it. I would like to read that into the record at this time. This is a resolution of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Central East Florida supporting the establishment of the sheriff-trained on-site marshal program in Brevard County Schools. Whereas it is the responsibility of the Brevard County School Board, first and foremost, to provide for the safety and security of Brevard County Public Schools students, faculty, and staff, and whereas the governor and the Florida legislature, through passage of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School Safety Act, provided for the establishment of on-campus school marshal programs as a means for providing for said safety and security of students, faculty, and staff. And whereas, while it is vitally important to implement the facility's hardening measures, adopt the mental health screening and other provisions provided for in the aforementioned legislation, it must finally be recognized that all of these provisions taken together, including the establishment of additional school resource officers for every public school, will still not be enough to guarantee this aforementioned safety and security of our students, faculty, and staff. And whereas properly vetted, screened, trained, deputized, and appropriately armed school staff members acting in a voluntary capacity as on-site marshals under the supervision of the Brevard County Sheriff's Office will provide an additional critically needed layer of defense against anyone with deadly intent seeking to harm our students, faculty, and staff. And whereas we have great confidence in the ability of the Brevard County Sheriff's Office under the leadership of Sheriff Wayne Ivey to establish and implement such a program, now therefore be it resolved that the members of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Central East Florida unanimously endorse and call upon the members of the Brevard County School Board to act without delay to adopt and implement the sheriff-trained on-site marshal program as proposed by Sheriff Ivey. The time to act is now. Any further delay would constitute a dereliction of duty on the part of the board in meeting its obligation to provide for the safety of our children as well as the faculty and staff of Brevard County Public Schools. I believe that I don't need to add anything to that. I honestly think that you already know what the right decision is. The only question that remains is, will you have the political courage and the will to exercise that decision? Thank you very much for your time.
Vern Blanchette, Sanford Olshansky, and Margaret Gudlach.
Superintendent Blackburn, Chairperson Craig, and School Board, thank you for the honor of letting me address you. I'm a father of 6, and I want to talk to you a little bit about SROs. I beg you not to place SROs in every school. The safety you think this will provide is an illusion. Let me explain. Number one, an SRO's response is not fast enough. Consider Maryland Great Mills High School, where the SRO reached the scene of the shooting within 1 minute and shot the killer. But don't forget that the shooter he stopped was not the typical mass murderer. It was a boy who shot a girl he had a prior relationship with, and then he stopped shooting. For the rest of the 1 minute it took the SRO to arrive on the scene, he could have harmed another 10 children. They were just lucky. Number two, history has shown us that one SRO does not provide enough firepower to stop armed and dangerous people. Consider Columbine, where a single armed officer was overpowered by 2 boys. He was wounded, and they enjoyed a lot of time in the school, killing children and teachers with no opposition. Number three, history has shown us that one SRO per school is not sufficient. The SRO may hear the gunfire, but he has no idea how many killers are there. He will recall Columbine and may wait for a backup to arrive. Stoneman High is clear evidence of this. And while he waits, more students die, okay? What you need for your children to be protected is what I call real protection. Real protection has 6 distinct characteristics, 2 of which are, number one, real protection must be very quick, no time for 911 or the SRO, who may be quite some distance from the violence. Number two, real protection must overwhelm the killer so that he or she loses control of the situation. If not, if he maintains control and kills the SRO, he's free to continue killing the children. The only protection that meets these requirements or these characteristics is concealed carry by many teachers, as is being done successfully in many states throughout the nation. Unfortunately, the Democrat legislators in Tallahassee and many of your teachers will not allow real protection in Brevard County. The next best thing is school marshals, because having several marshals in each school will decrease the response time from what an SRO can provide, and multiple marshals will be able to overwhelm the killer. I beg you, please drop the very expensive plan for SROs in every school. Instead, go with the school STOMP plan or Marshall plan, and your only cost will be training the marshals. You don't need to get a tax increase. This is common sense and is the right thing to do for our children, teachers, and taxpayers. Thank you.
Sanford Olshansky, Margaret Gudlach, and Julie O'Neill.
I'm Rabbi Sanford Olshansky. I'm an ordained rabbi and a faculty member of the University of Central Florida in Orlando. I live here in Melbourne and have come to speak as an interested citizen and as an authority on traditional Jewish teaching. I know that many political liberals, including some Jews, are opposed to placing any armed personnel inside our schools and in fact would like them to be gun-free zones. We have seen the tragic results of such an approach in Columbine, Newtown, and most recently in Parkland. I'm here to explain how such an approach is contrary to ancient Jewish rabbinic teaching. One of the most studied parts of the Talmud, the encyclopedia of discussions of the early rabbis, most of whose texts are 1,500 to 2,000 years old, is the law of the pursuer. In the context of ancient times, it says that if we see a person with a drawn sword pursuing another person, presumably to commit murder, we have an affirmative duty to stop the pursuer by any means possible, including the use of deadly force if necessary. The rabbinic discussion suggests that this duty may be based partly on a verse in the Holiness Code in chapter 19 of the book of Leviticus, which says, "You shall not stand idly by the blood of your fellow." The presumption in this ancient text is that when a pursuit with intent to kill is observed, the person who sees it has the means to stop the pursuer. In ancient times, that would have meant that an adult male would have carried routinely some sort of sword or knife. Otherwise, how could he have used deadly force to stop the murderous pursuer? In our times, unfortunately, it means that stopping the pursuer will usually require a gun. In order to prevent further murders in our schools, we can conclude from this ancient text that there must be people in our schools who are armed with guns and know how to use them. Unfortunately, our county currently has a shortage of police officers at both the city and county sheriff levels. Even if all of the departments were fully staffed and could spare an officer or officers to be on duty at our schools, one officer might not be enough for our large high school campuses and possibly for some of our larger middle schools. Therefore, Sheriff Ivey and School Board Member Deskovich have proposed the creation of STOMP, the sheriff-trained on-site marshal program, in which responsible citizens who have passed a background check would be trained to use firearms and would be stationed in our schools. This is supported by State Representative Randy Fine. Preference for this program would be given to former military personnel and retired police officers. Think of how many lives may have been saved at the Canadian Parliament a few years ago when the Sergeant-at-Arms, a retired Mountie, just happened to have a gun in his desk and used it to stop an armed intruder who had already killed an unarmed soldier outside. I wish we lived in a world where firearms were unnecessary, a world where the lion lies down with the lamb as envisioned by Isaiah. This is not the world in which we live today. And
Thank you, sir.
sadly, it is not the world in which our children are living in our schools.
Thank you, sir. Margaret Gudlach, Julie O'Neill, Connie Rook.
Good evening, Board. Thank you so much for being willing to listen to the public. You've had quite the extensive debate, and my comments will be very short and sweet. I'm a parent of 2 children in Brevard Public Schools. I am a member of the Sales Tax Oversight Committee. For the last year, I've lived and breathed school security. That does not make me an expert, but I will appreciate your attention with my comments this evening. It's been a while since I've spoken with you last, and always right at this point I get nervous. So because I would much rather be in my garage this evening, tinkering with something, I opened the door today and I thought that that would be actually a very good analogy. Tonight you have before you 3 proposals, and I would like to recommend that you vote yes on each one of them. And I will tell you why. Because when I open the door to my garage, I don't pick one tool to get the job done. I look and I have a toolbox available to me. And one of those tools I think I could have brought tonight, which might have been effective, a hammer. But would you have let me in the door? Is this an appropriate place for a hammer? It is an inoffensive object on many days. And I think that the debate extends to our STOMP program, our SROs, because at the end of the day, all of our schools are not created equally. Each one of you know that when I look at the security that our schools have needed, there have been different solutions. There have been different tools in the toolbox. And I would recommend that each one of you who have so much anxiety and so much feedback from our community consider all the tools that you have at your disposal. Now, because I'm a history major, I'm going to end with a story. At one point in time, there were a group of Taoist monks who put together different chemicals in the hopes of extending life. But what they actually created was gunpowder. And this has been that type of conversation in our community, unfortunately. So I wish you the best of luck in your decision this evening, and thank you for your service. Use your tools appropriately.
Margaret O'Neill, Connie Rook, and Eric Lehman. Julie O'Neill? Oh, I'm sorry. Julie O'Neill.
Oh, you said Margaret? So, yeah.
Sorry about that. Julie O'Neill, Connie Rook, Eric Lehman.
My name is Julie O'Neill, a voting member of District 3, and I'm here to ask you to vote no to the Guardian program. I am also asking that you not consider any other option other than putting an SRO in every school. I have complete faith that you can find the money and resources to do that, and I believe our children deserve your creativity here. Who will these school safety directors and school safety and security specialists be? Are they just random applicants that will be given permission to carry guns on campus with our children? I'm sorry, but 176 hours of training is not enough compared with the mountains of evidence against guns on school campuses. And the 770 hours required of a law enforcement officer plus 40 hours of SRO training. I want a trained SRO at every BPS campus. I'm also here to offer solutions that will hopefully increase the well-being of our students, because I believe that part of this issue is mental health, and our kids deserve more from our schools. I would encourage you to view, and I will be emailing you all a link to the website of the Sandy Hook Promise. These are free programs offering anti-bullying, gun violence prevention, training and warning signs, and even a hotline to report suspicious activity. I'm aware that some of these things may overlap training you already have and are implementing. However, it may supplement our knowledge to prevent an issue. I also believe we need more counselors and social workers available to our children. I was appalled at the first town hall to learn that it takes 3.5 months for our children to see a guidance counselor. That is not acceptable. I also believe our children need to receive regular assemblies to learn skills in conflict management, effective communication skills, anti-bullying, and creating a space for inclusion in all of our schools. I believe this happens at home as well, but our schools are building the future generation, and these are life skills that they deserve. I will also send you a local resource of someone who can help with this. Please put an SRO in every school. Thank you for your time.
Connie Rook, Eric Lehman, Julie Adams.
Evening, my name is Connie Rook. I have two very distinct points to make this evening. First one, on Friday, April 16th, Brevard Public Schools distributed a survey to employees via email to gauge support of the Guardian program and arming staff. The link to the survey was shared widely and also posted on Facebook and other social media sites. So non-BPS employees took the employee survey multiple times. When concerned employees brought this to your attention, BPS still published those results and shared those flawed and invalid results with community and media outlets. That same flawed format was used for the survey for families, and that data is useless as well. Today's newspaper said that BPS took several steps to monitor and test our results. The only way you can separate duplicate responses in SurveyMonkey, which is the tool that you used, is to sort by IP address. For most of us, Wi-Fi is the IP address of our router. So basically, if 100 people took the survey via the free Wi-Fi at Starbucks or at the county library, would you have only counted 2 responses? Because that's basically what you did. The data is manipulative, it's invalid, and frankly, it's embarrassing. I really hope that our school system was smarter than that. The cardinal rule of research and statistics, control the variables. If any one of your students had used data like that for a paper or for a project, they would get an F. You are not voting on corn dogs or chicken nuggets for lunch. You are making decisions that impact the safety of our children. So, our schools are a safe place. Trust me, there's not a person in this room that would drop our babies on your doorstep every morning if we didn't believe they wouldn't be safe. We need to keep them safe, and we need you to be smart. There is no evidence that mass shooters target so-called gun-free zones. A comprehensive analysis by University of Massachusetts determined that of the 111 mass shootings involving 6 or more victims since 1966, just 18 occurred in a gun-free zone. Rather than choosing a target because of the perceived gun-free, shooters most often had some prior connection to the location or the victims targeted. Now let's think about that. Every one of us can name the most deadly shootings in the last 20 years. Columbine, 1999, Virginia Tech, 2007, Sandy Hook, 2012, Parkland, 2017. And for every one of those stories, we also know that it was not a random event. Every single shooter had a prior connection to the school and a tragic backstory that may have prevented the shooting. Think about that. In the world of risk mitigation, that means you have an opportunity to prevent these incidents from happening. Adding more guns is not prevention. What does prevention look like? Mental health counselors, smaller class sizes, red flag laws, improving student services, so many better ideas, better paid teachers and deans that have time to work with their students. Your principals and deans are on the front line every day with students. They know their school, they know their kids, and they make a difference every day. They know how to protect our students, and quite frankly, you need to talk to them. Thank you.
Eric Lehman, Julie Adams, Ashley Burke.
Mr. Craig, Dr. Blackburn, members of the board, my name is Eric Lehman. I have 4 students in Brevard Public Schools. And earlier this year, I had the pleasure of working with an amazing team of educators selecting next year's elementary science curriculum. I was humbled by the amount of work that went into the process. I spent days in this very room communicating with teachers about the needs of both students and educators. It felt as if there was two-way communication occurring that was actually appreciated from all sides. Parts of the discussion around the Marjory Stoneman Douglas School Safety Act has been similarly fantastic. I have seen Brevard County's taxpayers, parents, students, and educators come in droves to stand at this very lectern and tell you that they think the idea of arming staff of Brevard Public Schools is ludicrous. From what I can tell, though, the board is not listening, especially if you think that hiring new, non-instructional staff and calling them officers is any sort of tenable compromise. The parents, students, and educators that you supposedly represent have expressed their concerns to the point that I feel as if it is repetitive to personally reiterate them for the third time for you. The STOMP plan is a program that is based off of delusional ideations of being a hero. If school safety is working correctly, the heroes are the teachers, guidance counselors, administrators, and mental health professionals. They are the people who do the hard work of keeping our schools safe for our students. To those who want to arm staff, the lives of my children is too high a price to pay for anyone's hero fantasies. To the staff that actually keeps my children safe, thank you.
Julie Adams, Ashley Burke, Hamilton Boone.
Good evening, members of the school board. My name is Julie Adams, and I'm a sophomore at Rockledge High School. I come here tonight to ask you not to implement the Guardian Program. The Guardian Program will bring needless danger and violence into our schools. This program will make us feel less safe and more afraid. Other members of the community have shown you evidence that the program will not work, so I won't bother with the exact numbers. All I can say is that the schools are supposed to be safe environments, and this program will undermine that safety. We, the people of Brevard County, do not want this program. Even your own polls found that students, teachers, and school employees oppose it, and parents are split down the middle. If we absolutely have to have armed personnel in schools, they should be school resource officers, whose primary job is security. Brevard County should be making national headlines for our exceptional students, not for the highly questionable decisions of our school board. When our students feel safe, we do amazing things. We make beautiful art and music, play high-level sports, and score near the top of the state on standardized tests. If you give school employees guns, you take that beneficial learning environment and ruin it. Even if the Guardian Program is temporary, you won't be able to rebuild that bond between school staff and students. Are guns really worth the cost of a healthy school environment? The prospect of going to school surrounded by concealed carrying armed guards is scary, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. But spending the majority of my day in an environment where people around me are packing heat and I don't know who's carrying the deadly weapon makes me anxious. Teenagers today already have higher levels of anxiety and depression than at any other point in history. The last thing we need is more stress. Arming school personnel just means more bullets flying if there's a shooting. You're asking school staff to sign up to possibly shoot the very kids that they helped, students that they've seen grow and develop. That's a burden that's unfair to place on anyone, let alone someone who signed up to work with children, who chose to dedicate their life to guiding students of all ages. Even if somehow you could justify the emotional and psychological consequences of surrounding children with concealed weapons, it wouldn't be effective. The news outlet Mother Jones compiled a database of over 60 mass shootings from 1982 to 2018 and found zero evidence that killers targeted gun-free zones. So now you're just introducing danger to schools with zero benefit. Seriously, we don't benefit from this. School employees have to go through additional training. Students will now be surrounded by armed employees all the time, and none of it will make a single iota of difference. Brevard County is better than that. We should do better than implementing a program which we know won't work. We are better than that, or at least the people of Brevard County are better than that. Are you?
Ashley Burke, Hamilton Boone, Christopher Moore.
Good evening. My name is Ashley Burke. I'm a proud graduate of O'Galley High School, and I'm a voter in District 2. I just have a couple short comments that I wanted to make. I would like to ask you not to make a short-sighted, knee-jerk reaction. It's clear that the STOMP program purely serves as a security blanket. We should be stopping weapons before they get through the doors. We need a proactive solution, not a reactionary one. Regarding the armed guards, a mall cop cannot stop guns from entering campuses. They do not act as a deterrent, as we have seen time and time again, and as demonstrated by the recent Melbourne Mall shooting, and they can also not take on an active shooter. Please do not open the door to an emotional, ineffective measure that is the STOMP program. If you want to protect children, secure the entry points, and enact the proactive measures that have been suggested. Thank you very much.
Hamilton Boone, Christopher Moore, Dan Bennett.
Thank you. I just planned on coming here earlier today. I'm 3 weeks out from a successful lung surgery. But I felt it was important I speak about this. I graduated from O'Galley High School in 1966. My son graduated from Satellite High School last year, valedictorian. He's having a successful college career where he's top of his class in the honors program at USF. We have a tough problem, but there's an easy solution. The problem is how to stop the murders of innocent students and teachers, and the answer is arming men and women, whether they're teachers, guardians, or members of the STOMP program. The job of school officials is to educate and at the same time protect children. It has been that way forever. I did my first 7 years of school in a single-room school, 12 grades. That's the job of the school. Excuse me. We don't want to repeat what happened in Marjorie Stone Douglas. Bureaucracy failed them with the Promise Project. And if none of you know about the Promise Project, I urge you to look it up. It failed the students and it failed that one beautiful teacher that died. I hear that it costs too much. Well, then I would ask you, exactly what is the price tag of a child? Can any of you tell me what that is? How much? School grounds are very large and complex areas, and one person cannot handle taking care of an active shooter. These police officers that are here, by the way, there's 3 of them, so that should, by someone's estimate, triple the amount of violence in this area. These guys will tell you that. Let me close with this. I'm a Vietnam-era veteran. I'm a Marine infantryman, 67 to 68. I now carry a concealed weapon since 1991 when I was shot at in Atlanta, Georgia. The weapon I had on me after that 1 year later in Atlanta, Georgia saved my life. I never had to pull the trigger, but the sight of it stopped what was about to happen. I'll be retiring also after 39 and a half years as a PA, the 22nd of this month. I will volunteer my services for this program to protect our children and our teachers.
Thank you, sir.
I'll donate my salary to the school where I work so it doesn't cost too much money.
Thank you very much, sir. Christopher Moore and Dan Bennett.
Good evening, board members. I didn't plan on speaking tonight. I just felt I had to come up here and say something. 500. That's how many accidental deaths there were in America last year. So there's cops. There's been cases of cops and instructors teaching gun safety classes that have shot people. Cops who have hours of training, hundreds of training hours on gun safety, have shot people, teaching them gun safety. I mean, that should tell you right there, more guns equal more gun deaths. It doesn't eliminate something happening. Right after Parkland, a Georgia teacher locked himself in a classroom and was suicidal and shot a shot in school. Teachers have enough to worry about, and they're already underpaid, to have to worry about acting like a Rambo if something happens. I've done training, I'm a paramedic, I've done training where I've listened to kids and shooting gunfire go off, and it'll freeze you. And anyone here who thinks that someone with a concealed weapon is gonna go against someone with an assault rifle don't know guns. These cops will tell you that. They have bulletproof vests. An assault rifle is not a match, or a concealed weapon is not a match for an assault rifle. And if you guys think that it is, you don't know nothing about guns. And the hypocrisy of it. Mike Pence went to the NRA, and none of their members could have guns. But you want to put it in school with teachers and people you hire off the street like the guy that was up here. Come on. Come on. Also, you want, for the Guardian program, 12 hours of racial sensitivity class, from what I heard, is required. As a black man, I don't think 12 hours is enough to stop someone's bias with my kids in the classroom, all right? My kids are in that classroom. If a teacher has a bias, 12 hours of racial sensitivity class ain't gonna do nothing. It's not gonna make me feel better with my kids. Sorry for yelling. I apologize. So, I mean, like I said, I didn't plan on speaking, but I came here and I thought I had to say this stuff. No one talks about the teacher in Georgia right after the Parkland that was suicidal. No one talks about the accidental deaths that happened. No one talks about Mike Pence and the hypocrisy of it, that you can't have guns around the vice president, but you want to give guns around teachers and people off the street with my kids and their kids. Come on. You have to have a better option. Hire resource officers. I went to Mel High. I graduated from Mel High. We had a resource officer. She was cool. Everyone knew her. She had a relationship with all the kids, and people went to her when they had problems. Like, people went and spoke to her, and she would try to help them or send them where they need to go. That's what we need. We don't need teachers who want to have a fantasy that wants to go shoot up someone who's a student. Also, if someone dies, put in the plan that you have to drive that parent's house. No cops. You drive there by yourself. And you tell that parent why his kid is dead because you couldn't come up with a better option.
Thank you,
put
sir.
guns in school.
Thank you. Dan Bennett. It's all for you, Mr. Bennett.
Thank you. Good
Sign up
evening,
last.
members of the board, and good evening, Dr. Blackburn. I think I'm last on the list here, and I just want to summarize and offer some thoughts. First of all, it can't be stated enough what a difficult decision this is, and it can't be said enough how impressed I am with you all that you've sat through all these forums, that you've read, I'm sure, hundreds of emails. You've been so patient through all of this, and yet this is such a terribly difficult decision. And what makes it so hard is that this is a question, this is a test that probably doesn't have an answer key. See, everybody's coming up here and telling you what to do because we know. We have our facts, we have our statistics, we have our anecdotes, we have all our situations to share with you, all our scary hypotheticals, and yet nobody really knows, and you might not either, because we don't want an incident in our campus to prove us right or wrong. And yet every day without an incident, is it because of you? Is it in spite of you? If there is an incident, was it made worse because of you, or was it made better because of you? Would there have been more with that? So this is something without an answer key, and nobody really knows. Except, of course, that man on the radio, he knows because he's really funny. But other than that, it's hard to really know the future. So what do you do as an elected official? Well, I would start by suggesting, well, let's think of it as a metaphor here. You were going down the path towards increasing school security, and that path, you're hardening the schools, and that path came to a stop on February 14th, and suddenly there were a lot of other paths in front of you. And I have no doubt you want to go down the path of most safety, but what path is that? As leaders in a democracy, you want to go down, well, I would suggest that you strip away the extremes. We know there's people always ready to come out to the gunfight, right? There's people always ready to say that, Second Amendment, and if you don't increase the guns or take away our guns, that's a problem. You always have people ready to say that if you introduce a gun, you're going to have an accident. Take that away for a moment and look at the grand mass middle of what you've been told over the past couple weeks. And what you've been told is that you have a group of people that don't want the guns in the schools near the kids. You have people that don't want the teachers, the assistants, the cafeteria people, the custodians, the administrators. They don't want the guns anywhere around the children. Now, would they accept them on campus where they're telling you loud and clear they want SROs in every school? So there's one path that says an SRO in every school by the first day of school next year. That path, the hard reality is that that path might not be open. And yet the law says armed security in every school by the first day. And so you might have to come up with another way of having security on the campus, but keep the guns out of the hands of staff. See, in a democracy, you're looking to go down the path with the most people going with you. And you don't want to submit to mob rule, but this is a mob that's going to travel with you down that path, support you down that path towards keeping the guns away from the staff, and work towards a plan to getting SROs just as soon as you can. Thank you.
The board wishes to thank this evening's speakers, and your willingness to speak to the board is truly greatly appreciated. And I do just want to add thank you very much for the decorum, for the respect that you gave each other. It says a lot for our community and for the professionalism that we are all moving towards. So thank you very much. I do have one request from one board member for a quick break. Does anybody else need that before we get to the consent? So let's take 5 minutes. It's 15 after. If we can have the timers at 21 after, it's just click to 16. So 21 after, if we can start, and please heed the dais call. In recess. We are back in session. Thank you for taking your seats. That moves us into the consent agenda. Dr. Blackburn.
There are 35 agenda items under this category.
Thank you, Dr. Blackburn. Does any board member wish to pull any items?
Yes, F18 and F19.
Mr. Ziegler, F18, F19, F18 reappointment nominations, and F19 reappointment nominations. Any other board member wish to pull anything?
I'd like to pull F11, please.
F11, Ms. Deskovich. Any other things to pull? Pam, would you please pull F11, F18, and F19 for discussion? I will entertain a motion to accept the consent items with the exception of those items just mentioned that were pulled for discussion.
Move to approve consent.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Ziegler, seconded by Ms. Belford. Is there any discussion?
No, sir.
Please vote. Motion passes 5-0. We'll start in order. F11, Ms. Deskovich, your motion.
I don't have any concerns. I just wanted to point out to some people in the community, we've done a lot of.
Do you want to make a?
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you could just make a motion.
I would like to move to approve. Thank you.
Moved by Ms. Deskovich.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Ziegler. Now, discussion, Ms. Deskovich. sorry.
We've met with many in the community that have had great concerns about weapons in our schools and the STOMP program, and they have given feedback. And one of the major concerns, I've heard several of you tonight say that this doesn't satisfy your concerns. But I just wanted to point out that we included so many things in this MOU that those that were opposed to the original STOMP plan in this MOU. And somebody mentioned in one of their public comments about the job description, and that comes later for information on our agenda if you want to take a look at that. It's a really rough draft at this point. We will continue to work on that between now and the next school board meeting. We welcome input and ideas on the job description if you want to email any one of us or all of us for some of the requirements that you'd like to see. And that's all I wanted to say. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Anybody else on F11? Mr. Ziegler?
Obviously here, everybody's here for the same reason and is concerned about how security is implemented. At a previous meeting, I had made a comment that nobody said they don't hold us responsible for security. We did actually have somebody tonight say security is not our responsibility. I disagree. However, to implement that, and everybody says to use common sense, one of the things I also heard is proactive. And I don't know how you do proactive unless you have somebody dedicated to being proactive. While I certainly respect the officers, SROs, and everything that they do, as many people even said tonight, they have a lot of other responsibilities that are very valuable in our schools that do not make security their 100% full-time proactive responsibility. So while we are moving to that effect, we need a solution for proactive security. This solution, in my mind, which we will get the definition or the requirements at a future point, but our thoughts is there are plenty of people out there that today are wearing a uniform, tomorrow may decide that they would prefer to be in a role of a security officer, or maybe they are retired, as we've had some people suggest, and then therefore would be the perfect fit for that job. I don't know why one day when they're in uniform and the next day when they're not, that they're any less capable. They'll be trained additionally. I think this meets the requirements of virtually everybody I have spoken to. And at this time, I can't support the volunteer program because of some roadblocks, but this is a proactive measure. We need to move forward, and I think this is a great idea. And I appreciate everybody who suggested it and brought it forward. Thank you.
Mr. Susan? Nope. Ms. Belford? Thank you, Mr. Ziegler. I would echo those comments, as those are something that I have been saying all along. Things changed, the culture, just like 9/11, February 14th changed everything as well. And so we have to rethink how we do something. It changes the culture, it changes the way we approach something. SROs are doing a phenomenal job, and as we have stated in many of our workshops and had been briefed on that, they are a reactive force. They are integrated in the classrooms, they're integrated in the school. I believe that we need a proactive security team, and I believe that this gets us to that point. It answers the mail on a lot of the things that not only did the legislature ask for, but it is a proactive change in the way we do business. It is not, I believe, a compromise. It is a way to further harden our schools and add yet another layer, and I'm very in support of it. Any other comment?
Yeah, I forgot a couple things I
I'm
wanted
sorry.
to discuss. That's okay. I forgot to mention some of the things that the hole that this fills for me and for many that I've talked to. One, this is an employee of ours, where SROs are employees of the sheriff's office or of the local police offices or the municipalities. And within that, we can specify their job duties. And if you look in the job duty description, you'll see that they can be walking perimeter fences, they can be checking door locks. We don't have anybody really on our campuses, especially our elementary schools, doing those things specifically in charge of that. I'm actually really excited about this role, introducing it into our school system. I know somebody mentioned they'd like to see these phased out once we get SROs in every school, but I believe this could be an essential role to our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deskovich. Any other comments? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Please vote. And the motion passes 5-0. F18, F18, Mr. Ziegler. F18, your motion?
Yes, this is going to be a bit odd, but I may need to make a point, and I need to use this as a way to make the point. And it's a motion at this point. Well, although I have no issue with anybody being reappointed, I believe they all should be reappointed. I have a motion at this point to not reappoint. And that'll probably die of no second.
There's a motion on the table to not reappoint. Do I hear a second?
I will second for discussion, because I think we need to hear the rest of the story.
Okay.
Second
You'll hear it either way. So actually, interestingly enough, a speaker tonight made part of my point. There are some teachers at a school that are not being renewed. Now, I believe that at some point in time they will. However, I have received a communication that was sent to a employee that is not being renewed, that implies that the official notice of non-reappointment will be complete when the reappointment process is complete, saying that that non-renewal, that you are not renewed if you're not part of the renewal process. That is a scary feeling for a teacher, and I never knew that before, that is a solidified, if you follow what I'm saying. You're not renewed. If you're not part of this batch, then you're not renewed. That means that you don't have a job coming the following year. I don't believe that'll happen because we can't find enough good teachers. However, it's very concerning, and I think we can do a better job of assuring our teachers that are not going back to the same position because of enrollment changes. We could do a better job of reassuring them that we want them, we need them, and they're going to have a job. I've learned that we do give binders out to new teacher prospects. We still continue to give those out. And so I've questioned, why can't we give binders out to those teachers that are not going back to the same position, but we want them to stay within our district, so they have a feeling of security of a job in the future. I originally was going to pull this, and I'm going to still make the same point, is that non-renewal is a way of letting somebody go for whatever reason. And we have at least one situation I know of, and now I don't know if there are any others. We have at least one situation of a non-renewal for somebody, and as you know, I have spoken about this many, many times, is that I don't feel that we treat our employees fairly when they're accused of something. And there have been some investigations, and I've heard different stories, and I have a letter here to somebody who was investigated. It says, "You shall not contact any colleague, employees, or students during the investigation." Our employees' friends, the people they socialize with, are their colleagues and their peers. And so at the point in time there's an investigation, you're asking them to be cut off from their peers. So, and I've heard stories, and I've spoken to somebody specifically who says, well, then I go to the store in this situation, and I'll get around back to my point, is that, well, they go to the store with a ball cap on and sunglasses on because they don't want to come in contact with anybody and violate the requirements of this investigation. Criminals don't get treated that way. So there was this investigation that then found to be unsubstantiated, which was great. We've had that happen many times, and somebody should then go back to work. During the course of this particular investigation, there was a question asked of this person about something, a parenting decision that did they make or not make in the home. For example, if an employee struck a student, spanked the student, they would be, or accused of it, they would be put on paid administrative leave pending investigation. Frequently, it's proven that students don't tell the truth, and this didn't happen. The employee is cleared. During the course of that investigation, say that the parent was asked, well, what do you do at home? Do you discipline your kid at home? And of course, most parents do, and that's good parenting. And then decide that, well, if you do that at home, that's unethical because it's unethical in school. Point being is we have a non-renewal, and now I see we have more that may be non-renewed. But this particular one is non-renewed because of a parenting decision. I have an issue with that, and I have an issue with the fact that this letter says that this particular person is not going to be renewed once we pass renewals. It's a very definitive statement in this letter. I think that's a terrible, I just think this is all a terrible way to treat people, and I think making judgments on employees based on their parental decisions in their home is a very slippery slope for us to go down. And I don't believe, Mrs. Enville, I don't believe we have a policy on parenting, do we?
Not that I'm aware
I don't believe there's a statute on parenting. Yet we're going to make a determination on what somebody makes as a decision as a parent in a home. I've just got a real problem with this, and since it's not an agenda item, this is the only way that I've been able to make the point is because it's tied to renewals, that this person won't be coming back to us. And I have an issue with that. And now I have an issue with, I know for a fact we have teachers that are not being renewed and don't have any guarantee yet of employment next year. Yet we know as a board, we know as leadership that most of these people are great people, that we do want them to stick around, and I do know of one, as a matter of fact, who's looking for a job elsewhere, a gifted teacher. And I believe the board has had some conversations about we want more gifted teachers, and they're hard to find, and we decided we want to go down a road of training. Yet we have a gifted teacher that is now renewed, doesn't have the binder, and is looking for another job. We can do more to show our employees that we value them and that we want to keep them around, rather than just going through the process and treating them like a number. And so I just have an issue with the non-renewal being so definitive for the non-renewal person, if that makes sense. So I do want to see these people renewed, but unfortunately, it's the only thing I could tie it to since it wasn't an agenda item. And if you can't tell that I'm passionate about the way we poorly treat our employees, I am, and I don't know what else to do but to make a stance in public to support our employees.
Any other comments? Mr. Susan?
Were you going to say something? I'll follow you. Can I clarify that, Andy? What you're saying is that we made a decision, you're reporting that we made a decision to non-renew an individual inside of our school system based upon the fact that they made a decision at home.
Correct.
Is that verified, Dr. Blackburn, that we know of?
Yes, I could show you all, there's an investigation to that effect.
Okay.
Nevertheless, we need to move forward on this, but I just wanted to bring that out and air that out because I have a problem with the way we do things.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that to the attention, and I would recommend that you continue to work that through the appropriate cabinet members. And we will continue
Will
to
do.
support that. Any other comments before I call the question?
No, the question is to non-renew. Just make sure you're all clear.
Yes. No, the question is F-18, the approval of F-18. That's
My motion was to non-renew.
Your motion is to non-renew. Do I
Clarity
hear-
before you vote.
Right. So the vote is to this vote is to non-renew. It is not a, we'll take a voice vote, so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes,
No, no,
is
it fails.
defeated 4-1.
Fails. Thank you.
F-19, Mr. Ziegler.
Uh,
I'm sorry, we have to actually
You have to
approve
approve,
F-18
you have to
now.
approve F-18.
I will call the question on F-18. Pam, can we have that on electronic, please?
Did we have a motion to approve?
We did. You did not make that originally?
I'll make the motion to approve F-18.
Mr. Ziegler, move to approve F-18. Do I hear a
Second.
second? Seconded by Ms. Deskovich. Any discussion? I'll call that question. Pam. There it is. Thank you. Motion passes 5-0. F-19, Mr. Ziegler.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Ziegler, seconded by Ms. Belford. Any discussion?
I will make a related comment about support staff. If you recall, we received a report on investigations, and I noticed something on that report that said that support staff that is put on leave is not paid leave. And what I haven't gotten an opportunity to find out is if, at the point where a accusation is determined invalid, and that could take 2, 3, 4 weeks sometimes, do they actually get paid for the time that they didn't work? Because they're an hourly employee, you'd think that they wouldn't. But that then scared me to think that a support employee who was falsely accused of something might wind up without a month's worth of income. That can mean they lose their car, they lose their house. I'm curious, we need to know how that works, because it just scares me to death that somebody could be accused of something falsely and it destroy their life. That's all I have to say. We can call the question.
Is there any other comments?
Just can we put that on the discussion for our next retreat? Something we
Okay.
can go in depth
Good
with,
idea.
please. Thank you.
Pam, can you add that to our discussion items for our next retreat? Thank you. Hearing no other discussions, please vote. And motion passes 5-0 for F-19. We now move on to the action agenda. Dr. Blackburn.
We have 4 items, and the first is G44 on Brevard County Sheriff's Office Stump MOU.
What are the wishes of the board?
Point of order.
Move to approve.
Point of order. Mr. Ziegler, point of order takes precedence.
I just wanted to make a point that the legislation on this issue states very clearly that we have to opt in. We have to vote to ask the sheriff to implement. And I make that point because if we don't vote on this, if there's no motion or there's no second and it dies, then the issue dies. That's opting out. The reason that's important is because if we vote on this, I want to make clear, if we vote on this, and I checked with Ms. Anvelt to make sure that I was correct on this, if you vote and if you're a board member on the winning side of the vote, the majority side of the vote, and it's voted down, you and the majority can bring it back at any point in time. If it is not voted on, which is it dies, we're opting out, then in order for it to come back, it would have to be a recommendation of the superintendent, it would have to be the pleasure of the chair, or it would have to be a vote of 3 board members to ever bring this back. I just assume it be done in a method that is very difficult to bring it back. And so for that reason, I don't think that we should even be voting on this because the legislation doesn't require a vote. That sounds confusing, but the way procedures and parliamentary procedure works, majority. If it's voted down, anybody can bring it back. Also, a new board member in November could bring it back because they weren't part of the vote. I want to make sure it's not that easy to bring back. So whatever the pleasure of the board is.
Do I-
Move to approve.
I have a motion by Ms. Deskovich,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Susan. Discussion.
I'll take it. We've been through a lot the last 2 months, a lot of discussion, a lot of research, a lot of input, a lot of listening. And what it comes down to is I support every single layer of security that we can come up with for my children and for our students. And that means continuing to harden the schools, educating and awareness training, active shooter training, getting an SRO in every single school. I've already spoken to putting the security and safety specialist in. We'll start with 28 schools, and we hope to move from there. And I also support, and I just want to be clear, these are not teachers. These are staff, and and in my discussions, in fair discussions with parents that have been really concerned, they've envisioned that these guardians would be someone with severe arthritis, or they have these visions of the scariest person in the school protecting. What we would be identifying, and what the sheriff would be identifying, are people that have formerly served in positions of protection of us in their prior jobs. And I can't help but think they're already in our schools. No, they're not in every school. I have plenty of my own schools that are in my district that I can walk through, and I know there's no credible candidates for this, but we do have them within our district. And it costs us nothing. Okay, we got our insurance quotes back. I know we've gotten some emails today about that. It's $150 per guardian to insure them. It will cost us $150 to have that person there to protect my child if the time is necessary, and I continue to support that. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Ziegler?
As I had said earlier, there are some roadblocks for me on this issue that haven't been cleared up. One of which was mentioned earlier, and I believe Mr. Susan said at a previous meeting, is, and I did clarify that somebody in this position would be trained to not engage in a conflict at school. So if my child was in a fight and getting beat up, and that adult who was a guardian was standing there, they would just have to watch my kid continue to get beat up. I have an issue, and nobody's told me how we resolve that. We would need to get beyond that and have a solution for that. The other problem is you want secrecy for that individual carrying, but as soon as they don't engage in that conflict, it's obvious who the person is. So I think in most any of the scenarios, that secrecy would be gone the first time there was a conflict. Everybody would know. I haven't heard a solution to that problem. The other question I've been asking for months, and I don't have an answer to, is we have 10-month, 11-month, and 12-month employees. If a 12-month employee wants to take this 5-week program, do we ask them to take 5 weeks of vacation, or do we pay them their regular pay while they take the class? And if we do pay them, then what about the 10-month who is off for the summer who wants to take it? Do we then pay them? Well, there's no answers on that, so I don't know what the cost is. To say that there's no cost, there is a cost of somehow of salary involved and an obligation of being fair. Nobody's answered that question. So I have a few issues with implementing this. I'm happy that we have a solution that's proactive right now, and I think that moving forward on this would require more conversation and more understanding before we go down this road.
Ms. Belford?
I wasn't going to enter into discussion. I was actually going to offer a different motion, but Mr. Susan, I don't know if you want to speak to, okay. So I would actually like to offer up a motion to postpone this item indefinitely. That would provide the opportunity, if there is desire for exploration for some of those issues at a later time, to be able to do that. But it would not keep it in front of this board for us to make a decision on it, up or down.
So I hear that there is a
Second.
motion to postpone indefinitely, seconded by Mr. Ziegler. That motion takes precedence over regular business. Is there any discussion on the motion to postpone indefinitely?
Amy, can I get you to explain, if we postpone this, that all it would take is a motion and a second in a regular meeting to bring it back up? Or are we supposed to get a superintendent's recommendation and go through? Can you explain that process, please?
I believe if it's postponed indefinitely, it would take a vote of the board to bring it back. I don't even think the superintendent can bring it back, so actually that would probably be a little more restrictive than what I was suggesting. Yeah, we would have to, as a board, we'd have to vote to bring it back. It couldn't, one person couldn't just bring it back. I think that's correct.
I think that's correct. I would have to
Yeah, because we're moving into a specific position, we'd have to undo it as a group.
To postpone indefinitely is basically to kill the motion until it can be brought back by a majority of the board.
Correct. That's my
By a
understanding.
motion and a second, which would then require another vote to bring it back. If you want to postpone to a certain time, that is a higher precedence of motion, but then you would give a specific time and date, more likely a date of sometime in the future of a future board meeting. That means that the discussion is, or the item is set for an agenda at a specific time, whereas the indefinitely means that it needs to be brought back to the table by a majority of the board.
Correct.
Is there any other discussion before I call that question?
Yeah, I think Misty, the idea, what is the reason that you wanted to postpone it as opposed to vote for it? What was your reason behind that, Misty?
Primarily for a process issue going forward, so that we, in the event that we need to have additional discussion on it, that option is available, but not necessarily, I think I don't like the restrictive nature of the person being on the winning vote side in order to have additional discussion on the issue. I feel like it should be a collective as opposed to, an individual on the winning side of the motion, whatever that motion is. I felt like that would be more appropriate for the team. But I'm not opposed if someone wants to offer, a motion to postpone to a specific date, or I'm not opposed to that either. Just trying to refine the process for us.
Okay, do I have any other discussion?
I'll just say it's actually the same thing as not voting on it, other than the superintendent can't ever recommend it to come back. Only a vote of the board can bring it back.
Actually, the superintendent could bring the issue back because this was not a superintendent
is
recommendation to begin with.
That's a good point. He didn't recommend it in the first. I'm not clear about that, but nevertheless, I like going down. I like where you're going.
I have a motion that supersedes the first motion, that the item G, where are we? 44, be postponed indefinitely. Oh, look at that. Pam has made it magically appear. So I'll call that question. Please vote. The motion passes 3-2. Next, Dr. Blackburn.
Next is item G45.
We will, hang on. After our business section, we will. It is a parliamentary procedure where the item has been postponed indefinitely, so another member can bring it back at a later date, as long as there is a majority of the board to bring it back, but it will not be discussed or voted on at this time. Dr. Blackburn.
Next is item G45 on department school-initiated agreements.
What is the wish of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Ziegler, seconded by Mr. Susan. Is there any discussion?
No, sir.
Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 5-0. Dr. Blackburn.
Item G46 is on purchasing solicitations.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Susan.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Ziegler. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 5-0.
The last item is G47 on interlocal agreement for temporary spoil containment site at Cocoa Beach Junior Senior High School.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Ziegler, seconded by Ms. Deskovich. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 5-0. We are now at the information agenda, which
Mr.
includes
Chair.
items for board review and may be brought back for action at a...
John.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am sorry. I forgot my G48.
G48.
Please go back to the earlier thing, and I will, do you want to read it there, Ms.?
I don't think I need to read the whole thing again, but just as a general overview, we need a board decision as a sponsor to determine which option, which election you would like to have the petition for review of the 90-day termination from Legacy. Would you rather have a direct hearing conducted by the sponsor, which we have to do within 60 days after receipt of the request for hearing, or a hearing conducted by an administrative law judge? We refer to Division of Administrative Hearings.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Enval. And before somebody makes the motion, I need in the motion the actual choice that you are making so that we can either vote that as the option. It is either a direct hearing or a hearing conducted by an administrative law judge.
Move to go with administrative law judge.
Moved by Mr. Ziegler for a hearing conducted by an administrative law judge in the case of Legacy Academy Charter Incorporated. Do I hear a second?
A second for discussion.
Second by Ms. Belford. Discussion.
So,
Mr. Well, doesn't matter. Mr. Ziegler, was your motion?
I chose that option because we have to do the informal hearing. Which it's going to be 2 hearings in a row. It seems redundant that we have 2 hearings on the same topic. Unfortunately, based on our policy, forces us into that situation. If you all want to do 2, I don't have an issue with it, but it just seems redundant and almost mute.
Can I ask a question? I've never been through this process yet on the board. So what happens in the informal hearing and then what happens in that?
Sorry.
Did you shut me off?
Sorry.
What happens in the informal hearing as opposed to what happens if we were to do the final hearing also?
So Ms. Enval could probably explain it a little bit better, but there is a conflict. Bottom line, is there a conflict in our policy as opposed to what, in accordance with the newer state statutes? And I'll let Ms. Enval maybe give us a little bit more legal background on that.
I'll give you as much information as I can. Under Board Policy 9800 and the administrative procedures associated with therewith, there is an option to have an informal hearing. The best I can tell, there's no direction as far as to what that actually consists of. So I would probably defer to Mr. Ziegler to go back. I believe we've had informal hearings before, and I do not know exactly how those were conducted, but they don't have the formality of each side presenting their witnesses and their evidence and everything like that. I would think that an informal hearing would be that side saying, no, we've done this and this and this and this and this, but there's no obligation or any guidance as to what staff's response would have to be.
So do we have to do an informal hearing? Or?
Under a policy we have, and
And
there's
do
an
we-
informal hearing
Do we
option.
make a conclusion at that point?
There's no guidance on that, so I do not believe that you would have to take official action at that informal hearing. To me, it appears to be an opportunity to be heard, but I'm not sure what we've done in the past. The policy is not clear.
This doesn't make any sense.
So on one option, we make the decision here under 2 meetings whether to move forward with Legacy or not, and under the other option, we push it to DOA, and that would cost us X amount of dollars, a council and everything else. After both, is the appeal process the same way? Can they appeal DOA and appeal ours? And in that regard, what does that look like?
Either way, whether you do a direct hearing conducted by the sponsor or a hearing conducted by an administrative law judge, the sponsor shall decide during, let me start over. If you're doing a direct hearing in front of the sponsor shall decide upon renewal or by termination by a majority vote, and that's your final order. And during an administrative law judge, the administrative law judge will issue a recommended order, and then the majority vote of the sponsor shall be required to adopt or modify the ALJ's recommended order. And then we issue the final order, which then in and of itself could be appealed.
In both regards, they can appeal. And in the DOA, it comes back to us for final judgment, and then they can appeal that.
Right, as to whether or not you want to accept the administrative law judge's
Okay.
recommended order.
Ms. Belford, did you want to add anything? Sorry.
No, my original question of clarification has been addressed, and that is I just wanted to ensure that if we go the DOA route, that we do have the opportunity for the informal hearing here at the local level. Because I do feel like when we were kind of deciding how to move forward with the last board meeting, when the 90-day recommendation was brought forward, it was my understanding at that point that we would have an opportunity, and they would have an opportunity to go into more depth with us as to the progress that has been made in an informal hearing setting. So I just wanted to make sure that that opportunity was still going to be there if we did in fact move to go forward with the DOA.
And what triggered that opportunity is their petition for a hearing. We didn't know at that time if they were going to actually file that request.
And to clarify, at the informal hearing, if we're satisfied, we can give the superintendent direction to rescind the termination notice.
That's what I wanted to know, like, what would be the point of that informal hearing? Could we take
Correct. We
action?
could do that. If we feel at that informal hearing that there hasn't been adequate compliance, then we would not make the recommendation, and we would then go to the formal process.
Go ahead. No,
It
you're rolling.
seems more fair than to let this go to the judge. We'll do the informal. If we think there's not enough, then it would go to, what is that, a hearing
Like-
officer?
Right, nothing's really going to change between those two, so it's a duplicative process.
Is the process the same amount of time with both?
Yes, the requires that we have to do it within 60 days after receipt of the request for a hearing.
Which was when?
So we received a request for hearing, like a letter on April 27th, but the petition that actually, there's a specific form that it's supposed to comply with, that was received on May 1st.
So 'cause the
Looking
question
by
that
the
I-
end of June.
So the question I was getting at is that these people want to be able to run their school. Their kids need to be making choices. If we go down the DOA route, would that take it longer? Because then they got to go to DOA, come back to us, or since it's coming back to us, we could just go right then and then make a decision that costs no money to us as a school board, because we make the decision. We don't have to kick it to DOA and refer to another council.
Either way.
And we can do it quicker. Does that make sense?
No. So I think the confusion is coming in the fact that our policy does not match up with the actual law, okay? And Ms. Emval is going to fix that for us. But because we have a policy that was in effect when we issued the letter, we are bound by our policy to offer an informal hearing. At that informal hearing, the only thing that can happen would be that would stop the process by the board agreeing to rescind the letter at that point. Otherwise, it has to go to one of the other two things. It has to,
Right.
but by law.
Right.
And there's going to be a cost associated with any of that.
So would there be the same amount of?
Because the superintendent cannot be, in either one of those, that official hearing is an actual legal hearing
Right.
where we would have to have separate attorneys for the board and the superintendent.
Oh, so regardless of if we host it or DOA
Yes.
hosts it, we're still going to have to go to outside counsel
That's
That's true.
to pay for it? Okay, so that was the one piece. And then you're saying that both sides are exactly the same amount of time to go through, close enough to where it wouldn't be? Because I didn't want to have to send something to drag it out to where
Right.
they couldn't make a decision closer to opening, because we have a short window on our summer. Okay, thank you.
And the issue, just for clarification purposes, if the board does decide to go to the ALJ route, the DOA, the reason why this had to be brought today is I have to file that within 14 or 15 days of date of receipt of the petition. So that has to be filed next week, if that's what the board decides to do.
Have they given indication over which one they wanted to do?
No,
Okay,
not that I'm aware of.
covers all bases.
But we're the charter, so we.
I know, but I'm
we're
just
the-
trying to cover
we're the
all
legal
bases and
entity.
get all the information.
Okay, is there any other discussion? So the motion is to approve a hearing, or approve the attorney to pursue a hearing conducted by an administrative law judge if we get to that point after our preliminary hearing.
So I just, for time purposes
Actually,
again.
Make it.
Is that okay?
Yes,
For-
because I know there is a time period.
Yes,
so-
there is a time period. So I do not know when this informal hearing could take
Got it.
place. If we have to provide the 7 days notice that we normally do, I think I have to file it, if I'm doing my calculations right, by the 15th, which would be Tuesday. So I can still send it to DOA, and you can still have your informal hearing,
Correct.
and then the parties can agree to withdraw or.
So I think what I did was add in language that wasn't actually part of the initial motion, so I apologize. It's been a long
It's-
evening. So Mr. Ziegler's initial motion was to approve a hearing conducted by an administrative law judge.
As the second hearing, correct. First one informal we do.
Correct, because we're still following our own policy. It was seconded. Is there any other discussion? I don't think we have electronic on that one, so I'll take a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. And you have your direction then, Ms. Enval.
Yes, thank you.
Now, we are at the information agenda, which includes items for board review and may be brought back for action at a subsequent meeting. No action will be taken on these items tonight. Dr. Blackburn.
Mr. Craig and members of the board, there are 5 items under the information category.
Does any member wish to discuss an item? Hearing none, we are now at the board member reports and discussion points section. We have one identified subject, Mr. Ziegler, retirees as substitutes. Your discussion.
Correct. We've been discussing solving our substitute issue for probably over a year and a half now, and a lot of research has been done and a lot of discussion. The only thing I believe that we all agree with at this point in time is that our most valuable, talented, experienced group of potential substitutes, whether it be for teaching or even, by the way, for bus drivers, which we have a dear shortage of, is our retirees. Our retirees are restricted from coming back to work for an FRS agency based on state statute, even part-time, which is terrible. Be nice if we could work with the legislature to see if we get a little modifier for that, like Randy Fine modified retirement going to the end of the year, which was a smart idea, so we don't pull teachers out of classrooms mid-year for retirement. But in the meantime, a viable option, as we had discussed, is to move forward on an employee leasing arrangement where these retirees can come back. And I pushed the issue tonight because we're at the end of the year. We just had our retirement dinner. And I believe there's consensus that that is a viable first step to solving our problem. But if we want to take advantage of this group of retirees, I think we need to let them know before they make their plans for other jobs and what their future looks like. Let them know this is a viable option for them. So I would like the board to give direction. I don't know if Dr. Blackburn, if you need us to vote to give you direction to move forward on utilizing an employee leasing company to bring back valuable substitutes, or if it's just a consensus.
Dr. Blackburn, I believe I saw email traffic that indicated you were already pursuing this. Is that, am I mistaken in that?
No, that's correct. You saw that email.
And so we are already pursuing a contract with the vendor or getting the information to get.
We're getting information together, but I don't want to put words in Mr. Ziegler's mouth, but I think he's looking for a more, I don't know, urgent, more time-specific opportunity.
Looking to see if the board agrees that there's a valuable source of substitutes and that we need to do something to engage them.
Absolutely. I was under the impression that we were already moving down that path and that we were going to have at least a proposed solution as soon as possible. I don't know when that as soon as possible would be, but.
Correct. I don't have a date on it, but it was my intent to give the board a proposal as soon as possible. But
Okay.
there may be a greater urgency than ASAP.
Yeah.
Matt had something
So-
before I finish.
Mr. Susan?
They all leave, I think, May, 23rd, 24th, 20, depending on when they're retiring. So we would behoove us to get in front of them before they leave. So are you suggesting that prior to the end of the year, we try to approach these retirees to become substitutes with some kind of a plan? Meaning that today's May 8th, is that what you're getting at?
I suggest we put it on their radar screen and let them know that we are moving towards a solid solution,
Okay.
that they can do that, so they know it's an option. Many of them, I walked the room during the retirement dinner, were very interested in it. And the reason I brought up bus driver is one lady was a retired bus driver and just, I wouldn't mind coming back and subbing as a bus driver. And I was like, of course, that's a problem we need to reach. The only thing I would like to say is that we were provided via email a proposal from a vendor with some rates. That vendor is not a current vendor under contract with us. I just learned Friday, we have a continuing contract with a vendor who provides employee leasing services who would be very interested in this, and we've never contacted our own contracted vendor to ask if they can do this. And they said that they could, and they'd like to have the conversation. To go with a vendor that is not a contracted vendor and is not a piggyback would require an RFP. And that delays the whole process, which is okay, but it does delay the process.
There's, Andy, I think that when we spoke about this before, back when we had that meeting, I asked that question, I think it's inside the minutes, and they said that Sphurion did not have the ability to do the substitutes, and that's why we did go out to Kelly. I think that was what we.
Correct, that's what we were told. I contacted the vendor, and they said they've never been contacted, and they'd be glad to consider it.
I actually, Mr. Ziegler, had an opportunity to speak directly with the representative from Sphurion at a Titusville Chamber event, and her initial response was that they would love to assist us with substitutes, but when she went back and spoke with company leadership, she sent me an email, which I can forward out to the rest of the board, saying that they cannot currently facilitate substitute teachers.
I suggest we contact them. I know for a fact that's different today.
Okay, so I think, Dr. Blackburn, you're hearing the intent of the board is just to accelerate this and see if we can find a solution that gets us closer to hopefully retaining some of our substitutes, whether they're bus drivers or teachers. Is that?
If I'm hearing an expectation that I work with staff in order to bring back the best possible solution.
Correct.
Given the best possible timeline, I would say we're working towards that effort. If I'm hearing the board say they want a specific solution in a specific timeline, then I would need some explicit direction.
I like your best.
I'm not saying specific solution, other than we have a vendor we can talk to, but I just would like to capture this group of retirees by at least giving them notice that this will be in place before the beginning of the next school year, so that they can maybe give us, we can keep in touch with them, or that they can just make it a plan that that's an option. Because right now, they're not even thinking this for the next year. I want them to be thinking about coming back.
The employees in this category have been surveyed, so I would assume that based on the survey that Dr. Tokes, Mrs. Dr. Tokes implemented, that it's on their radar.
Thank you. Are there any more board reports or discussion points? Anyone?
No, sir.
I have one report from my time on the Brevard Schools Foundation. Dr. Blackburn and I attended the meeting back a couple weeks ago now, I believe. It's the last Thursday of the month. There is some incredible work being done by our volunteers on the Schools Foundation board and in the community. As you know, one of the big things that the Schools Foundation does is provide scholarships to our graduating seniors, needs-based scholarships that require an application, and then the applications are evaluated and scored. Each one of them are very intricate, deep, very emotional at times. Last year, I believe we had about 650 applications. This year, we had over 1,300, so almost twice as many. And each one of those takes somewhere in the vicinity of probably 15 minutes to score. And so there is a lot of time that was taken by the Schools Foundation. They are continuing to work, but I just wanted to acknowledge the great work that they do and the opportunities that they give to our students to go on to further their education. Also, on June 4th, as you know, is the Brevard Schools Foundation Golf Tournament. And I think most of the board will be there supporting in some way or shape, or fashion on the 4th. As a board member, even though I'm not a voting board member, I am required to sell raffle tickets. So I look to each of my board members, and I expect you to buy a raffle ticket from me. So that you will, and then you can, whatever you want to do with the
I
prize.
feel like I'm being strong-armed here.
You are.
I'm not sure that's legal.
Maybe check policy. Check policy.
You don't have to
I think I
buy
have a
one from
standing
me. I
order.
would just
I have a
ask that
standing
you,
order
I
every year,
ask
of course.
kindly that you would buy one from someone and support this great organization. If you would like one, please contact me.
What can we win?
You win all kinds of great prizes.
Wasn't a very good sell, John. What am I going to win?
Miss Belford.
I have one thing that I think that we had intended to put on for board discussion. It's a quickie, though. FSBA has requested that we notify them of the appointment of our legislative committee member as well as legislative committee alternate. I have been the legislative committee member for the past year. I'm happy to continue doing that if you all are amenable to that. And Mr. Ziegler, are you my alternate on legislative committee?
Probably.
Okay, so we need to be able to tell FSBA status quo, or no, they're not doing a great
Do you
job,
need
we
a
want to
vote
get
for
rid of
that, or
them?
No,
we
we
just
don't need a
don't?
vote, but
No,
I would,
just
I would give
a
it a
thumbs up, thumbs
up.
down.
Any other? Yes,
Status
Ms.
quo.
Deskovich?
Totally, but I have something after.
All
Okay,
right, so
I'll let them
thank you.
know.
If you could
Thank
let
you.
them know. Ms. Deskovich.
I want you all to start thinking if any one of you would like to serve on the Values Adjustment Board, because it's a complete waste of time. They ask you to sit there, you have zero power, you just rubber stamp. Well, I've asked our attorney that guides that board 10 times, explain to me why we do this. No one knows, no one, and I've said, I'm gonna ask to see if someone from the school board has to sit on it. In our county, they have zero authority to do anything. It's really a total waste of time. Sorry for the
Okay,
harsh
I will
language.
look into that as a chair. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, Ms. Deskovich. Anything else to discuss? Nothing from you, Mr. Souza? Okay. Before we close, I know that I don't want to, I want to make sure that everybody knows what occurred during the the consent agenda. Several MOUs were voted for, including F11, which was the MOU for the BCSO for the security officer, as well as the MOU for district security, a very large document that defines our relationship with just the Brevard County Sheriff's Office. The action item G44 was postponed indefinitely, which just means that it is not being acted on, and it can be brought back by a majority vote of the board. So hopefully that clarifies. And I will not try and infer any intent, but we do have an MOU that utilizes Guardian funding that was acted on under F11. That being said, Dr. Blackburn, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, sir.
Being no further business, this meeting is now adjourned.